You've always believed in the solidity of the world around you, your memories, your body, your history, your science. But solidity is the first illusion. Atoms are mostly empty space. Memory is unreliable, and history is rewritten each time it is recalled. If all of this is scaffolded on perception alone, how much of you is anything more than a flicker inside a simulation that doesn't need you to believe in it to remain real? You wake each morning believing continuity binds you to yourself, that the person who closed their eyes last night is the same one who opens them today. This assumption is so instinctive that you never pause to question it. You take for granted that your life is a single unbroken thread, woven seamlessly through time, each memory a bead, strung neatly on the same fragile cord. But continuity is not real, it is constructed. Psychologists have dismantled this illusion for decades. Elizabeth Loftus, in her groundbreaking experiments, demonstrated just how unstable human memory truly is. By subtly altering the phrasing of a question, she could convince people to remember broken glass at a car accident that never existed, or to recall non-existent details of a crime scene. Most disturbingly, she showed that entire childhood events could be implanted. When told a false story, such as being lost in a shopping mall as a child, participants not only accepted the fiction, but embellished it with invented sensory details. The smell of popcorn, the feeling of panic, the relief of reunion. Their brains constructed memory out of suggestion, and they trusted the memory because it felt true. If memory can be fabricated so easily, what does it mean for the you that depends on it? Your identity is nothing more than a narrative assembled from recollections. And if those recollections can be edited, bent, or replaced, then the identity itself is fluid, provisional, and fragile. Consider amnesia. When memory is erased, personality shifts. Without access to your past, your sense of self disintegrates. The you believe is permanent evaporates with the simple malfunction of neurons. Neurology confirms this fragility. Every time you remember something, you are not retrieving an intact recording. You are reconstructing it, reassembling fragments in the present moment. Each recall reshapes the original. In this way, memory works more like a palimpsest, where old inscriptions are scraped away and overwritten, yet faint traces remain. What you call your past is a living document, rewritten with every act of remembering. That means the truth of who you are is not preserved, it is perpetually altered, and history is no more stable than memory. What you believe to be objective accounts of the world are narratives subject to revision, propaganda, and erasure. Just as your personal memory is rewritten each time you recall, so too is collective memory rewritten with every retelling. Every textbook, every archive reconstructed to suit present needs. Your story is not unique, it is humanity's condition. You may argue that memory's fallibility doesn't matter, that even if details shift, the continuity of experience holds. But this is where neuroscience drives the knife deeper. Continuity itself is an illusion. Split brain experiments, in which the corpus callosum was severed, revealed that two separate consciousnesses could exist in one skull, each unaware of the other, each weaving its own narrative. The left hemisphere, tasked with creating explanations, fabricated reasons for actions initiated by the right hemisphere, even though it had no access to the true cause. This interpreter module shows that your brain invents coherent stories, not because they're true, but because coherence feels safe. You are a patchwork of confabulations, held together by convenience. Even the present moment betrays you. Studies on sensory processing show that what you perceive as now is delayed, stitched together from fragments arriving at different times. Your brain buffers reality, filling gaps with guesses, smoothing discontinuities into a seamless illusion. In other words, the very moment you are living is a reconstruction, no more real than a forged memory dot, so the foundation you cling to your past is unstable. The ground beneath your identity shifts with each recall, each perception, each second. You are not one continuous being, but a narrative stitched together, rewritten in real time by a brain that values coherence over truth. If memory is unreliable, identity fluid, perception distorted, and history rewritten, then ask yourself, what exactly is left of you? You imagine time as a river, a steady, unbroken flow carrying you forward from birth toward death, with the past trailing behind and the future waiting ahead. It feels linear, intuitive, obvious. Yet every serious investigation into the nature of time, whether from physics, philosophy, or psychology, has torn that intuition to shreds. Time is not a river. Time is a wound. Einstein revealed the first fracture. Relativity showed that time is not universal, not absolute, not a single thread binding all beings equally. Two observers moving at different speeds, or resting in different gravitational fields, experience different times. Their clocks do not agree. The faster you move, the slower your time passes compared to someone standing still. At the edge of a black hole, time stretches until moments become eternities. So which version of time is real? Whose clock dictates truth? The answer is brutal. There is no master clock. The now you trust is provincial, local, relative. Your present is not shared by the universe. It is stitched together by your limited perspective. If that were not enough, physics drills deeper. The equations describing reality, whether in Newtonian mechanics, relativity, or quantum theory, do not privilege the flow of time. They are symmetrical, reversible. If you ran them backward, the laws would still hold. There is nothing in physics demanding that time must move forward. The only reason you feel time as an arrow is entropy, the gradual increase of disorder described by the second law of thermodynamics. Ice melts, smoke disperses, bodies decay. But entropy is not a law of flow. It is a statistical probability. And probability can be bent. That means the arrow of time is not intrinsic. It is emergent. Psychology cuts you even deeper. Your brain cannot perceive time directly. Instead, it builds time from memory and anticipation, stitching together perception into sequence. Neuroscience shows that the present moment is not instantaneous. It is a construction lasting a few seconds, a temporal buffer that smooths out reality. When you clap your hands, the sound and the sight reach your brain at different speeds. Your mind corrects for the lag, creating the illusion of simultaneity. In reality, you never live in the now. You live in an edited past. Consider déjà vu, the eerie sensation that you are reliving something, that the present has already happened. It is not proof of reincarnation or prophecy. It is a glitch in memory processing, when the brain mislabels the present as the past. Yet the effect is overwhelming. You feel you have already lived this moment. Déjà vu reveals how easily the machinery of time perception can break, and how utterly dependent your reality is on neural bookkeeping. Philosophy dismantles what remains. Think of Augustine, who in the Confessions wrestled with the impossibility of defining time. If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to him who asks, I do not know. Centuries later, Heidegger would declare that human existence is inseparable from temporality, that you do not have time, you are time. But if time is your very structure, what happens when its coherence crumbles? You dissolve with it. And then comes the final blow, the block universe theory. According to this interpretation of relativity, past, present, and future all coexist equally. Time is not flowing. It is already laid out, complete, a frozen dimension. Your birth, your death, every thought, every failure, every fleeting moment you cling to as yours, they're all simultaneously there. Sense of flow is only your consciousness crawling along the frozen architecture, like a needle tracing grooves in a record. You are not moving forward. You are trapped. Do you see the consequence? If time is relative, emergent, a construction, or frozen, then the flow you depend on is nothing but illusion. You are not progressing through your life, you are suspended in it, motionless, while your mind generates the comforting fiction of movement. And here's the question you must confront, the one that should make you hesitate before glancing at the clock again. If time itself does not flow, then what exactly is carrying you forward? You trust the solidity of the world because it resists your touch. Your table holds your weight, the ground does not swallow you, and your body feels dense, continuous, real. But physics dismantles this illusion with merciless precision. What you believe is solid is almost entirely empty space. Atoms, the building blocks of everything you see, are not miniature marbles packed together. They are mostly void. The nucleus, protons and neutrons, bound by the strong nuclear force, sits at the center like a speck of dust. Electrons orbit at distances so vast, relative to their size, that if the nucleus were the size of a peanut, the electron would be a mile away. Between them, nothing. Your body, your chair, the device in your hand, all of it is 99.9999999% emptiness. Solidity is an illusion born from electromagnetic repulsion, the resistance of electron fields pushing against each other. When you press your hand against a wall, you are not touching it, you are feeling the repulsion of invisible forces preventing the atoms from merging. You have never touched anything in your life. This fact is not speculative. It is foundational. Quantum electrodynamics, the most accurate theory ever tested, predicts these interactions with stunning precision. But accuracy only deepens the dread, because the closer you examine matter, the less matter you find. Atoms reduce to subatomic particles to quarks, and quarks to mathematical entities in quantum fields. The solidity of matter dissolves into abstract equations, probability distributions, and fluctuating energies. The world that feels so heavy in your hands is a ghost of mathematics. Think of the double-slit experiment. A single particle of light or matter, fired through two slits, produces an interference pattern, as though it were a wave interfering with itself. But when you try to observe which slit it passes through, the interference disappears. The particle behaves as though it knows it is being watched. The very act of measurement collapses possibility into reality. That means the chair beneath you is not solid until it is observed, and its solidity exists only in the context of observation. What you call matter is a collapsing of probabilities. A performance enacted when looked at. History echoes this unsettling discovery. Democritus imagined indivisible atoms as the foundation of reality, eternal and unchanging. But our science stripped away that comfort. Nothing is indivisible, nothing permanent. Even protons, once thought stable, decay on cosmic timescales. The stuff of existence is temporary, fleeting, unstable. You cling to solidity that, given enough time, will vanish into radiation. And yet, your perception insists on mass and weight. Your senses lie, but they must. If you saw the truth, that your body is a cloud of probabilities floating in void, you could not function. The illusion of solidity is necessary for survival. Evolution tailored your perception for utility, not truth. Donald Hoffman's evolutionary game theory demonstrates this brutally. Organisms that perceive reality accurately are outcompeted by those who perceive only what aids survival. You are not designed to see reality. You are designed to see a useful fiction. So here you sit, convinced of your body, your room, your world, all while surrounded by absence masquerading as substance. And yet deep down, you cannot deny the implication. If matter itself is emptiness structured by observation, then the world around you is a mask, which leads to the only question worth asking. If everything you touch is void, pretending to be solid, then what exactly are you made of? You cling to the belief that your consciousness, the inner voice, the persistent I, watching the world, marks the center of your existence. You treat it as immovable, the one thing you cannot doubt. You can distrust your senses, question your memories, even doubt the solidity of matter, but you still trust the feeling that you are experiencing this moment right now. Yet this trust is misplaced. The very thing you call consciousness is not a stable essence, but an emergent glitch, fragile, fractured, and riddled with holes. Consider the famous case of split-brain patients. Neurosurgeons severed the corpus callosum to treat severe epilepsy, disconnecting the two hemispheres of the brain. The result was not one unified consciousness, but two. Each hemisphere carried its own perceptions, its own awareness, its own will. When the left hand, guided by the right hemisphere, reached for an object, the left hemisphere, the seat of speech, had no idea why. But it fabricated reasons anyway. If the hand grabbed a book, the patient might say, "I wanted to read." The truth was that half of their brain acted independently, and the other half invented a story to preserve the illusion of unity. What does that mean for you? That the inner narrator you identify as you is not a master of the self, it is an interpreter, spinning explanations after the fact. The brain acts first. The story of why comes later. You are not the author of your actions. You are their apologist. Neuroscience drives the knife deeper. Benjamin Libet's experiments in the 1980s measured readiness, potential's electrical activity in the brain that precedes conscious decision-making. Participants were asked to choose a moment to move their wrist while noting the instant they became aware of deciding. The shocking discovery: the brain's readiness potential began several hundred milliseconds before the participants reported making the conscious choice. In other words, the decision was made unconsciously, and consciousness merely arrived afterward to observe it. You are not making choices, you are rationalizing impulses that have already occurred. Later experiments strengthened this conclusion. Brain imaging studies by Soon, Brass, Hines, and Haynes showed that patterns of neural activity could predict a subject's decision up to 7 seconds before they became aware of choosing. 7 seconds. Your feeling of free, or the sense of control you guard so fiercely, is a delay, a spectator's illusion. You are watching decisions unspool as though you authored them, when in truth you are the last to know. And consciousness is not continuous. Neuroscience reveals it blinks in and out, like frames in a film. Your awareness operates in discrete perceptual moments, stitched together by memory and anticipation into the illusion of flow. Between those moments lies nothing, no awareness, no you. Yet the brain smooths over the gaps, creating the fiction of an unbroken line. Your life is not continuous experience. It is intermittent snapshots woven into a narrative after the fact. If you still insist consciousness is central, consider blindsight. Patients with damage to the visual cortex report complete blindness. Yet when forced to guess at the location of objects, they succeed at rates far beyond chance. Their brains process visual information without awareness, guiding behavior without consciousness. Consciousness is not required for perception or action. It is an add-on, a commentary. You are not the driver of your mind. You are its unnecessary passenger. Philosophy has always anticipated this horror. Descartes insisted that consciousness cogito, ergo sum, was undeniable proof of self. Yet modern science dismantles his certainty. The cogito is not proof of existence, but proof of illusion. The fact that thoughts appear does not guarantee a thinker. It guarantees only a process, neurons firing, signals cascading, stories forming. And what is a process but an algorithm, an unfolding simulation written into biology? The hard problem of consciousness, how subjective experience arises from matter, remains unsolved. Every attempt to explain it reduces consciousness to functions, correlations, computations. but none bridge the gap between physical processes and the feeling of awareness. David Chalmers called it hard because no mechanistic account explains why experience feels like anything at all. Why should neural firings produce the sensation of red, or the taste of bitterness, or the ache of grief? No theory answers, and the silence itself is damning. What you call consciousness may not be fundamental at all, but an emergent mirage. History offers no comfort. Philosophers from Hume to Nietzsche to Dennett strip away the illusion of selfhood, exposing consciousness as a construct. Hume declared the self was nothing but a bundle of perceptions, never found when examined directly. Nietzsche ridiculed the idea of a unitary self, calling it a grammatical fiction born of language. Dennett calls consciousness a user illusion, like the desktop of a computer, useful, but not real. The I you cling to is nothing more than a metaphor, mistaken for substance. And here comes the recursive horror. If your memories are unstable, if time is emergent, if matter is emptiness, and if consciousness itself is fabricated, then what exactly remains? You are a ghost trapped inside an interpreter, weaving stories from void, mistaking narrative for existence. Even worse, your consciousness may not even belong to you. The default mode network of the brain, active during rest and mind-wandering, is responsible for generating the sense of self, but its chatter can be silenced. Psychedelics, meditation, trauma-H can dismantle the network, dissolving the boundaries of self into pure perception. When it happens, people describe ego death, the annihilation of the I. Yet perception continues, sensation continues, thought continues. Experience unfolds without anyone to own it. This reveals the final secret. You are not necessary for awareness. Consciousness does not require you. So when you close your eyes tonight and feel the fragile pulse of your awareness, remember, it is not proof of self, not proof of will, not proof of reality. It is a hallucination generated by tissue that will one day rot. You are nothing but a flicker, a voice that will stop mid-sentence when the machinery collapses. And the question you must whisper into that silence is this: if your consciousness can vanish without the world noticing, then what was the you that you believed was ever here? You have been taught that history is a record, that it preserves what happened, that it binds civilizations together, that it gives you the story of how you came to be. You repeat the words, "The past cannot be changed," as if this mantra could anchor you against uncertainty. But the past is not fixed. It is written and rewritten, forgotten and fabricated, shaped not by truth, but by power, politics, error, and perception. Just as your memory betrays you, collective memory betrays us all. Consider George Orwell's chilling maxim in 1984. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. It is not fiction. Governments, empires, and ideologies have always curated history, erasing what threatened them, fabricating what glorified them. Entire civilizations vanished, not because they were destroyed, but because their records were. Think of the Library of Alexandria, reduced to ash. Think of Mayan codices, burned by conquistadors. Think of the countless lives, stories, and truths obliterated before they could even be remembered. What you call history is a graveyard of deliberate forgetting. Even the histories you trust are not objective. They are narratives, biased by authors, shaped by victors, written to legitimize power. The phrase, "histories written by the winners," is not a cliché, it is a law. The suffering of the defeated, the nuance of the oppressed, the contradictions of the past are erased to create the illusion of a coherent story. You inherit not truth, but propaganda disguised as inevitability. Psychology confirms how easily narratives overwrite reality. Just as individuals misremember, so too do societies. Morris Halbwachs, the sociologist of memory, argued that collective memory is always reconstructed in the present. Communities remember what serves their identity, their cohesion, their survival. Traumas are silenced, inconvenient details forgotten, myths invented. Nations mythologize founding fathers, sanctify wars, erase atrocities. What you call your heritage is not the past, it is the story chosen for you. Even documents cannot save you. Paper rots, ink fades, files corrupt, archives burn. Digital data, thought eternal, vanishes as formats become obsolete, as servers fail, as corporations collapse. Imagine future archaeologists unearthing fragments of your world. Incomplete records, broken drives, corrupted files. They will reconstruct your history from shards, filling gaps with imagination, just as you do for those who came before. How much of what you know of Rome, of Egypt, of Sumer, is invention masquerading as scholarship? Your textbooks are reconstructions, no less subject to error than your own fragile memory. And even when the records survive, interpretation mutates. Historians revise accounts with each generation, projecting new values, new frameworks, new ideologies. Yesterday's hero becomes today's villain. Yesterday's villain becomes today's misunderstood victim. What was once clear becomes ambiguous. What was once ambiguous becomes weaponized. The past is not stable. It is clay, molded endlessly by the hands of the living. Worse still, history bends not only to politics, but to psychology. Elizabeth Loftus proved false memories can be implanted. Entire populations can be led to believe in events that never happened. Collective false memories, now called the Mandela effect, spread across millions. People swearing Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s, or that the children's book series was called The Berenstain Bears instead of The Berenstain Bears. These glitches reveal how fragile shared history is. If millions can confidently recall a false event, what prevents entire epochs from being fabricated? How much of what you believe about the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, or even the last century is invention? Philosophy sharpens the wound. Nietzsche warned that history is not truth, but interpretation, that every retelling distorts. Michel Foucault dismantled the very concept of objectivity in historical narrative, showing that every archive, every discipline, every category of knowledge is bound by power. What you call history is not reality. It is discourse, manufactured to sustain systems. You do not remember the past. You remember what was permitted. And here comes the recursion. History is memory, and memory is unreliable. Your personal recollections rewrite themselves with each recall. Collective recollections do the same. A nation remembers an atrocity differently each time it commemorates it, just as an individual remembers a trauma differently each time they tell it. Memory is not a window into the past. It is the creation of a present identity. So ask yourself, if the past cannot be preserved, if history is curated, erased, rewritten, and fabricated, then what are you standing on? The ground you believe stretches behind you is not solid. It is quicksand. You cannot walk backward through time to verify it. You cannot reach beyond the words of the victors. You cannot separate memory from narrative, narrative from power, power from illusion. You think history is truth, but history is propaganda. History is forgetting. History is a lie polished until it gleams. So here's the question that should unsettle you whenever you recall the stories of your ancestors, whenever you cling to the lessons of the past, whenever you think your identity is anchored in history. If your past is rewritten each time you tell it, then how can you be certain that it ever existed at all? You believe in a core, you, a stable essence that persists through change, through years, through memory's distortions and history's lies. You imagine that beneath the masks you wear, the roles you play, and the shifting desires that move through you, there is something constant, yourself. Yet this belief is the most dangerous illusion of all. The self you cling to does not exist. It is a hallucination generated by the brain, a fragile story assembled moment by moment, collapsing the instant you look too closely. Begin with David Hume, who in the 18th century dismantled the notion of the self. When he searched his own mind for a permanent identity, he found nothing but a bundle of perceptions, thoughts, sensations, emotions, each arising and passing away. There was no unchanging observer, only a sequence of experiences mistaken for continuity. To Hume, the self was a fiction. You believe you are the same person today that you were 10 years ago, but in reality, you are a different bundle of perceptions, stitched together by memory and language. Modern psychology and neuroscience confirm his suspicion. Studies of patients with dissociative identity disorder reveal that entirely distinct personalities can emerge within the same body, each with its own memories, handwriting, even physiological responses. The body remains the same, but the self splinters into fragments. If one body can contain multiple selves, then the self cannot be fundamental. It is an arrangement, a story told by the brain, and stories can be rewritten. Think of phantom limb syndrome. An amputee continues to feel sensations in a limb that is no longer their pain, itching, movement. The body generates an illusion of a part of the self that has ceased to exist. If your nervous system can fabricate a body part, why should it not also fabricate a self? Both are maps in the brain, simulations designed for survival. And like all simulations, they can glitch. Consider also depersonalization disorder, in which sufferers report feeling detached from themselves, as though they are observing their life from the outside. Or Capgras delusion, where a person becomes convinced their loved ones have been replaced by imposters. These conditions reveal that the self is not unified, not stable, not guaranteed. The very sense of I can fracture, distort, or vanish. Neuroscience digs deeper still. The default mode network, the web of brain regions active when you are not, focused on the external world, is responsible for the construction of the self. It is the voice that narrates, the storyteller that binds memory into identity. But under psychedelics, trauma, or meditation, this network can be silenced. The result, ego dissolution. People report the annihilation of the self, the collapse of boundaries, the realization that the I was never real. Yet perception continues. Experience continues. The body moves, the world unfolds, without a self at the center. Consciousness does not require an I. The self is not the engine, it is a passenger, and often an unnecessary one. Philosophy compounds the horror. Nietzsche declared that the self was a grammatical error, a projection of language, born of the subject-predicate structure. When you say, I think, you imagine a thinker distinct from the thought. But thought simply occurs. There is no thinker behind it. There is no agent pulling the strings. The I is a linguistic convenience, nothing more. And Buddhism, for centuries, has preached the doctrine of anatta no self. The illusion of self is the root of suffering. Cling to it, and you will always fear loss, because you will always imagine something permanent to lose. But in reality, there is no permanent entity-only process, flux, impermanence. You are not a soul riding a body. You are a swirl of conditions, temporary and dissolving. Now consider the implications. If there is no core self, then who suffers when you feel pain? Who chooses when you make a decision? Who dies when your body rots? The answer is chilling. No one. There is sensation without an owner, action without an agent, death without a victim. What you call you is a story told by neurons, and when the telling stops, there is nothing left to lose. But your mind recoils, because the illusion is functional. Evolution favored creatures who believed in a unified self, because it allowed for planning, responsibility, continuity. The illusion is adaptive, not true. Donald Hoffman's work shows that perception evolved not for accuracy, but for survival. The self is another useful fiction, a user interface that hides the unbearable complexity of reality. Just as the icons on your computer screen hide the circuitry, the self hides the machinery of your brain. You are not meant to see the truth dot, so here you stand, or rather, here you think you stand clinging to a story of me that unravels as soon as you tug at its threads. There is no core, no essence, no unbroken identity persisting through time. There is only a process, a hallucination, a mask over emptiness. And here's the question that should haunt you as you whisper the word I. Again, if the self does not exist, then who exactly is whispering? You believe you choose. You believe that when you raise your hand, when you speak a word, when you decide between tea or coffee, it is you, your will, your freedom that makes the choice. But this belief, too, is an illusion, as fragile and false as the self that clings to it. Free will does not exist. Every decision you make is the inevitable consequence of prior causes, an unfolding of physics, biology, and chance. The story of freedom is only a story, written after the fact. To mask the machinery beneath dot, begin with the experiments of Benjamin Levitt in the 1980s. Subjects were asked to press a button at a moment of their choosing, and to note the instant they became aware of their decision. Electrodes measured their brain activity. What the researchers found was unsettling. The brain showed signs of preparing the action nearly half a second before the subjects reported deciding. The readiness potential, a spike of neural activity, came first. The conscious decision came after. What you experience as free choice is a story your brain tells after the action has already begun. The machine moves, then invents an author. Later experiments refined and extended these results. With brain scans, researchers could predict a person's decision several seconds before they became conscious of it. Imagine that a machine reading your brain can know what you will choose before you do. Where, then, is freedom? If choice can be predicted before awareness, your awareness is not the cause. It is the echo. Determinism sharpens the blade. Every atom in your body obeys the laws of physics. Every neuron fires according to chemistry, electrical charge, and the conditions that came before. Trace any decision back far enough, and you find causes outside your control. Your genetics, your upbringing, the environment, the random collisions of molecules. You did not choose your desires, your fears, your strengths, your weaknesses. You did not choose the conditions that shaped you. And if you did not choose them, then what sense is there in saying you are free? Even quantum randomness, often invoked as a loophole, offers no rescue. Randomness is not freedom. If your actions are determined, you are a machine. If they are random, you are a dice roll. Neither scenario grants you authorship. You do not control the dice, nor do you control the clockwork. Consider addiction. A heroin addict craves the drug, often against their own wishes, their own health, their own happiness. Does the addict choose to desire ruin? No. The desire arises unbidden, imposed by the brain's altered wiring. But if the addict is not free in their craving, why imagine you are free in yours? Your love of coffee, your fear of spiders, your attraction to certain faces all arise unbidden, shaped by genes and experience. The addict is only an extreme version of the condition you live in daily, compelled by forces you do not control. Sam Harris offers the stark image. Think of the next thought that will appear in your mind. Wait for it. Now ask, did you choose that thought? Did you select it from a menu? Or did it simply arise, unannounced, from the void? If you cannot choose your next thought, how can you claim authorship of your actions, which are born from thought? Yet you persist in believing. Why? Because the illusion of free will is functional. It creates responsibility, order, and morality. Societies built on determinism collapse into despair, while societies built on freedom flourish with accountability. The illusion is adaptive, but usefulness is not truth. The truth is cold or dot, and the truth erodes justice. If no one is free, then no one is guilty in the way you imagine. The murderer did not choose their violent impulse any more than you chose your compassion. Both are products of genes, brains, and circumstances. Punishment, then, is not about retribution. It is about deterrence, safety, rehabilitation. The moral weight shifts. No one deserves hell. No one earns virtue. All are mechanisms playing out their programming. The horror lies in this: you cannot escape the machinery. Even knowing this truth, you will go on believing in choice, because the illusion is too deeply woven. You will say, "I decided." You will feel responsible. You will condemn others as though they could have acted differently. You are trapped in a theater of freedom, watching a play that hides its gears, a puppet convinced of its autonomy while the strings are invisible. And so you must ask, if your life is only the unfolding of causes stretching back to the beginning of time, if every choice is an echo of collisions and firings and laws beyond your control, then what does it mean to be you at all? You are not free. You are the illusion of freedom, a script reciting itself, a ghost pretending to hold the pen. You cling to memory as though it were the bedrock of self, the proof that you have lived, that you are continuous, that you are not a ghost flickering in the dark. You think of your childhood, the faces of those you love, the first moments of joy and of grief, and you trust them as anchors. Without memory, you say, you would not be yourself. But the truth is crueler. Memory is not an archive. It is an act of invention. Each time you recall, you corrupt. Each time you remember, you rewrite. The psychologist Elizabeth Loftus exposed the fragility of memory with devastating clarity. In her studies, she demonstrated that false memories can be implanted with ease. Participants were told stories of events from their childhood, some real, some fabricated. A majority came to believe and vividly recall the invented events, complete with imagined sensory detail. They remembered being lost in a mall or meeting a character who never existed. The brain filled in the gaps, and the fiction became indistinguishable from fact. What you recall is not a recording, it is a reconstruction, vulnerable to suggestion, distortion, and decay. The misinformation effect goes further. If you witness an event, then later receive misleading information about it, your memory rewires itself to match the false detail. Show a person a car accident and tell them afterward that the car was blue, and they will swear it was blue even if it was red. Their memory rewrites itself to fit the story. Your memories are not windows into the past. They are stories edited for coherence, consistency, and comfort. But what happens when you remember repeatedly? Each act of remembering destabilizes the memory itself. Neuroscience shows that recall renders a memory malleable, vulnerable to alteration before it is stored again. Every time you revisit a memory, you risk changing it. You are not preserving the past, you are rewriting it. Slowly, over years, what you remember diverges from what occurred, until the truth is gone, and all that remains is the story you have told yourself enough times to believe. History itself collapses into the same problem. Collective memory, what societies call history, is equally subject to distortion. Documents burn, victors rewrite events, losers vanish from the record. George Orwell was not imagining when he wrote, "Who controls the past controls the future." Every nation, every culture, shapes its memory to justify itself. And just as your personal memories shift with each telling, so too does history become mythology, crafted to preserve the illusion of continuity and purpose. Even your most cherished memories betray you. Consider childhood nostalgia, the house you grew up in, the neighborhood you played in. Return to them as an adult, and they seem smaller, stranger, even wrong. You trusted the memory, but the memory was never accurate. Your brain filled in, exaggerated, warped. Even in the moment of formation, the memory was already false. And what of trauma? You imagine it seared into the mind, permanent, uncheckable. Yet trauma too is unstable. Survivors recall events differently over time. Details shift, vanish, reappear. The very intensity of trauma corrodes the reliability of memory. What you most fear to forget is often the most untrustworthy. If memory is flawed, then what becomes of identity? You say, I am the sum of my memories. But if those memories are corrupted fictions, what are you summing? A collage of errors, stitched together into the illusion of continuity. You tell yourself you are the same person who lived your childhood, but the brain that recalls is not the same brain that lived. Neurons have died, new ones formed, synapses rewired. The story is all that bridges the gap. The you of 10 years ago is not the same entity as the you now. You share no stable matter, no perfect continuity of thought. Only a corrupted archive links you, and the horror sharpens. What you believe about yourself, your loves, your losses, your victories may not have happened as you think. Perhaps your happiest memory is false. Perhaps your deepest wound is embellished. Perhaps the core of your identity rests on lies your brain invented without your consent. So then ask, if every memory is a palimpsest, overwritten again and again, each recall erasing as much as it preserves, then what remains of the self? If you are not your body, not your choices, and not even your memories, then what are you but a story that cannot stop rewriting itself? You measure your life in time. Seconds ticking, hours passing, years accumulating like layers of sediment. You imagine time as a river, flowing steadily forward, carrying you from birth to death. But physics annihilates this comfort. Time is not what you think it is. It is not absolute, not universal, not even guaranteed to flow in the direction you feel. The clock that rules you is a construct, and the flow you trust is an illusion. Einstein shattered Newton's universe of absolute time. Relativity showed that time stretches and contracts depending on speed and gravity. A clock on a satellite ticks faster than one on Earth. An astronaut orbiting Earth ages more slowly than their twin on the ground. Time is elastic, subjective, dependent. There is no single now, for the universe only fractured local times, each observer trapped in their own bubble. The simultaneity you assume, the idea that events happen at the same time, dissolves into relativity's cruel geometry. Think of the twin paradox. One twin travels near light speed, then returns. The spacefaring twin is younger. The earthbound twin is older. Same genetics, same starting point, same choices, but their lifetimes diverge because time itself diverged. What you call aging is not universal. What you call how long is relative to your trajectory through spacetime. Even your heartbeat is tethered to coordinates you cannot control. Then there is entropy, the arrow of time. You believe time flows forward because you remember the past and not the future, because broken eggs do not reassemble, because smoke disperses but never recoalesces. But this is not a fundamental law, merely the tendency of systems to move from order to disorder. Physics equations work equally well forward and backward. Nothing prevents time from running in reverse, except probability. The arrow of time emerges from entropy, not from necessity. The flow of time is statistical, not absolute, but your brain insists on forwardness. Neuroscience tells us that your sense of time is constructed from memory, from attention, from perception. To the brain, time is elastic. Moments of terror stretch into eternity. Hours of routine vanish in a blink. A life of monotony collapses into a blur. A single second of pain becomes unbearable expansion. Time is not what you live it, is what your brain manufactures. The watch on your wrist does not measure what you feel. Worse still, physics hints that all of time may already exist. The block universe interpretation of relativity describes past, present, and future as equally real, all laid out in space-time like frames of a film. You do not move through time. You are frozen within it. The sensation of flow is an illusion produced by consciousness as it lights up one frame after another. If the block universe is true, then your death already exists, as real as your birth. You are not traveling toward, you are already there. Eternally. History confirms the instability of time. Calendars have shifted, years miscounted, days added or lost. The very units by which you measure existence are inventions, conventions. The Gregorian calendar replaced the Julian. Leap years compensate for astronomical drift. Your today is a fiction aligned to human convenience. Ask yourself, what year is it, really? What day is it in the cosmos? There is no universal clock. Only fragmented measures, local rhythms, artificial order. Even at the quantum level, time becomes stranger. In quantum mechanics, particles do not obey a fixed sequence of cause and effect. Experiments with indefinite causal order show that events can occur without a set order, A before B, B before A, or both simultaneously. Cause and effect, the backbone of time, disintegrates. The structure that tells you one thing led to another collapses. Without it, what becomes of the story you tell about your life? And if time is not universal, not absolute, not directional, then what does it mean to say, I am now? You think the present is a knife's edge between past and future, but physics gives you no such edge. There is no privileged now. There are only slices of space-time, equally real, equally inaccessible. The present you cling to is just another illusion, a spotlight on one part of the block dot. So ask yourself, if time does not flow, if the future is as fixed as the past, if the present is not special, then what does it mean to live? You are not moving forward. You are a statue carved into space-time, staring at the illusion of motion. You speak of yourself as though there were a solid I behind your thoughts, a central witness pulling the strings, the pilot in the cockpit of your body. But when you look closely, when you strip away the illusions, the self vanishes. It is not a thing you possess. It is not a place you can find. The self is a story useful, persistent, but false. Begin with neuroscience. Split-brain patients, whose hemispheres are severe to treat epilepsy, reveal the absence of a unified self. One hemisphere can act without the other's knowledge. Show an image to the left visual field, processed by the right hemisphere, and the patient's left hand responds correctly, even while the left hemisphere, which controls language, insists it saw nothing. When asked to explain the left hand's behavior, the left hemisphere invents a story, confidently lying to maintain coherence. The brain creates an interpreter, not a truth teller. This is what you call self, a confabulation that stitches disjointed processes into a seamless narrative. Psychology confirms the fracture. Experiments show that decisions often originate unconsciously, only later justified by conscious reasoning. You think you choose, then explain why, but the explanation is always a story after the fact. The I is not the author. It is the narrator, taking credit for what was already written. Meditation traditions knew this long before neuroscience. Sit quietly and watch your thoughts, and you notice thoughts arise on their own. Emotions appear without your consent. The voice in your head speaks without your command. Who then is thinking? The very act of searching for the self dissolves it. There is awareness, but no owner of awareness. There is thought, but no thinker. The philosopher David Hume wrote centuries ago, "When I enter most intimately into what I call myself, I always stumble on some particular perception or other, never the self itself, only sensations, thoughts, Feelings, no substance, no core. The self is not found because it is not there. And yet the illusion is powerful. Evolution built it to hold the organism together, to coordinate survival. Without a sense of I, the body would fragment into competing impulses. The self is a useful fiction, a mask to bind the machinery into apparent unity. But usefulness is not truth. The horror emerges when you see how fragile this fiction is. Brain injuries can alter personality completely. A blow to the head, a tumor, a stroke, and the you trusted is gone, replaced by another. Was the former self you, or is the new one? Both? Neither? If a minor change in matter alters identity, what stability did the self ever have? Even memory cannot save you. You believe continuity makes the self, but memory is unreliable, corrupt, rewritten. And without reliable memory, the narrative falls apart. You are not continuous, you are stitched together day by day, fragile threads binding illusions into a whole. Consider Derek Parfit's thought experiments. Imagine your brain split in two, each half placed in a new body. Both bodies wake, each with your memories, your personality, your desires. Which one is you? If both are you, then identity is divisible. If only one is you, which one? There is no answer, because the question itself rests on the illusion of a permanent self. You feel this illusion unravel most sharply in dissociation. In moments of trauma or fatigue, you feel unreal, detached, as though watching life from outside. That feeling is not a glitch. It is a glimpse of the truth. There is no stable I inside to anchor you. Only processes. Only passing states. Only the story of self-doubt. And yet, you wake each day and say, I am. You insist on continuity, agency, ownership. You demand to believe in yourself because to lose it feels like annihilation. But the annihilation already happened. The self was never there. The mask was always empty. So ask, if the I you worship is just a mask confabulation, fiction, survival mechanism, then who, exactly, is reading these words right now? You are conscious. You know this more surely than anything else. You might doubt the world, doubt history, doubt even your own body, but the fact that there is awareness, that something is experiencing, seems undeniable. And yet this certainty dissolves the moment you ask the only question that matters. Why is there consciousness at all? Neuroscience can map brain activity, chart neural circuits, simulate decision-making. Electrodes can predict movements before you become aware of them. Scans can detect where emotions light up, where language forms, where memories activate. But nowhere in this machinery does science find consciousness. You can watch the neurons firing, but you will not find the feeling of red, the ache of grief, the taste of coffee. These are qualia subjective experience, and they remain the great wound in scientific explanation. This is the hard problem of consciousness, as David Chalmers named it. Explaining how neurons process information is the easy problem. Explaining how information becomes experience is the hard one. Why should electrochemical activity in 1.4 kilograms of tissue produce the rich theater of your inner life? Why does computation not remain dark, as it does in machines? Why is there something it is like to be you, instead of nothing at all? Philosophy stumbles on this problem again and again. Materialists insist that consciousness must emerge from matter, that once we understand the brain deeply enough, qualia will be explained away. But centuries have passed, and no mechanism bridges the gap between matter and awareness. Dualists claim mind and matter are distinct, but that only multiplies the mystery. Panpsychists claim consciousness is fundamental, woven into the universe itself, that even electrons have proto-experience. But then what is yourself, if consciousness is everywhere, not yours alone? Consider Thomas Nagel's famous thought experiment. What is it like to be a bat? You can know everything about echolocation, about the bat's brain, about its behavior, but you can never know what it feels like to be a bat. Objective knowledge does not give you subjective experience. Science describes the brain, but not the feeling. Or think of philosophical zombies, beings physically identical to you in every way, molecule for molecule, but lacking consciousness. They walk, talk, act, love, suffer, but inside, there is nothing. Could such beings exist? If yes, then consciousness is not required for behavior. If no, then why? And if they are possible, how do you know you are not one? Dreams sharpen the blade. Each night, your brain conjures entire worlds, complete with characters, sensations, narratives. Within them, you do not question reality. You believe, for as long as it lasts. But then you wake, and the dream collapses into absurdity. If your brain can generate entire realities that feel real, how can you trust this waking state is not another dream? Perhaps you will wake again into something larger and realize this life was only a fragment of a deeper sleep. Meditation and psychedelics reveal another fracture. Consciousness can expand, dissolve, split, merge. Under psilocybin, sense of self disintegrates, boundaries collapse, and the awareness that remains feels infinite, unbounded. Consciousness does not belong to you. It does not require yourself. It flickers, shifts, flows. If the self is an illusion, consciousness is what remains, but it too offers no stability, no ground dot, and then comes the abyss. The possibility that consciousness itself is an error of perception, that it is not fundamental, but a hallucination created by the brain to integrate processes. Some scientists argue that awareness is not real in the way you think, that it is a narrative overlay, a summary, a convenience. If that is true, then even the one thing you thought was undeniable, your own consciousness, becomes suspect. But can you doubt awareness itself? You can doubt the world, doubt yourself, doubt memory and time. But can you doubt that something at this moment is aware? Descartes tried to anchor philosophy here. I think, therefore I am. But what if thinking is just another illusion? What if the I that anchors the thought is absent? Then what remains? Only awareness, flickering without ground, like a flame with no fuel, a light with no source. And so you are left with the only question that matters, the one no philosophy, no science, no religion has answered. Why is there something it is like to be you rather than nothing at all? You trust your senses. You believe your eyes show you the world as it is. Your ears deliver sound faithfully. Your skin transmits touch directly. You assume that perception is a window. But your senses are not windows. They are filters, distortions, inventions. The world you inhabit is not the world itself. It is a hallucination constructed for survival, not truth. Take vision. Light strikes your retina, triggering electrical signals. But the raw data is not what you see. Your brain edits ruthlessly. The blind spot where the optic nerve exits the eye should leave you with a black hole in your vision. But you do not see it. Your brain fills it in with fabricated detail, blending it seamlessly with the surroundings. You think you see a continuous world, but a fraction of what you see is invented. Consider change blindness. Show someone two alternating images that differ in a significant detail, a missing object, a changed face, and they often fail to notice. Even when looking directly at the change, the brain overlooks it. You do not see the world continuously. You see fragments stitched together, gaps filled by assumption. You believe you are witnessing reality, but in truth, you are hallucinating consistency. And then there is the phenomenon of inattentional blindness. In the famous invisible gorilla experiment, participants asked to count basketball passes often fail to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. You can look directly at something and fail to see it entirely. Vision is not passive reception. It is active construction, guided by attention, expectation, and context. You see what your brain predicts, not what is there. Your other senses betray you just as deeply. The McGurk effect demonstrates how vision overrides hearing. Show a video of someone saying "ga" while playing the sound "ba," and you will hear "da." Your brain fuses incompatible signals into a fabricated perception. Taste and smell are equally entangled. Plug your nose, and food loses flavor. Touch can be tricked by illusions, like the rubber hand experiment, where stroking a fake hand in synchrony with the real one convinces you the rubber is yours. Your sense of body ownership, of self, can be rewritten with nothing more than synchronized strokes. Perception, then, is not about truth. It is about survival. Donald Hoffman's evolutionary game theory shows that organisms which perceive reality accurately are outcompeted by those which perceive only what aids survival. A beetle that mistakes beer bottles for mates passes on more genes than the one that sees truth. Evolution selected not for accuracy, but for usefulness. You do not see the world. You see an interface, like icons on a computer screen. Icons are not truth, they are tools. Click the folder icon, and you do not interact with circuits and voltages. You interact with a symbol. Your perception is no different. A symbolic overlay, evolved to keep you alive. Even color, the richness you take for granted, is fabrication. Color does not exist out there. It is the brain's interpretation of wavelengths of light. Some animals see ultraviolet. Some see infrared. Their worlds are not yours. Which version is real? None. All are interpretations. The redness of blood, the greenness of grass, the blueness of sky, these are not properties of matter. They are inventions of your nervous system. The world itself is colorless dot, and yet the hallucination is convincing. Your survival depends on believing it. If you saw the raw chaos of the electromagnetic spectrum, you could not function. You need the illusion of solid objects, stable colors, coherent forms. The brain hides the truth to let you act. You are not adapted to reality. You are adapted to a simulation. But once you recognize this, the ground shifts. You cannot trust what you see, what you hear, what you feel. You live inside a user interface, not the world. You mistake icons for truth. So ask, if perception is a controlled hallucination, if what you see and hear is not reality, but a survival game, then what is the world actually like when no one is looking? You believe time flows like a river, steady, linear, reliable. You imagine the past fixed, the present immediate, the future waiting. But your experience of time is less a river and more a dream. Memory, attention, and expectation warp it constantly. So much so that two people in the same moment may live in different times entirely. Start with memory. You treat it like an archive, a recording of what happened. But memory is not a recording, it is a reconstruction. Each time you recall, you rebuild, mixing fragments with imagination, context, and suggestion. The past changes in the act of remembering. Witnesses to the same event tell conflicting stories, each certain of accuracy. False memories can be implanted with nothing more than suggestion, leaving people convinced they saw or did things that never happened. What then is the past if it can be rewritten by the very act of thinking about it? Then there is the strange elasticity of time in the present moment. When you are bored, seconds stretch into eternities. When you are ecstatic, hours vanish in what feels like minutes. The clock ticks steadily, but your experience does not. Adrenaline can slow time. People in accidents often report the world moving in slow motion. Neuroscience suggests the brain, in heightened states, processes more data, making the moment feel expanded. But it is not time that changes. It is you, Consider déjà vu, that eerie flicker where the present feels like the past. For an instant, you are certain you have lived this before. But neuroscience points to a glitch in the brain's memory circuits. New information is mistakenly filed as remembered. The present is mistaken for the past, collapsing time's arrow. You are reminded that your sense of temporal order rests on fragile machinery. The boundaries between past, present, and future blur further when you realize how much of the present is prediction. Neuroscience shows that perception is not raw reception, but forecast. Your brain predicts what it expects to see, then updates with incoming data. By the time you are conscious of the now, it has already happened. You live a few hundred milliseconds in the past, buffered by predictions of the future. The present you feel is an edited, delayed version of events. Even at the scale of history, time is not what it seems. Cultures perceive it differently. Some see it as cyclical, repeating endlessly. Others as linear, progressing forward. Language shapes it too. Some tongues place the future in front of them, others behind, as if the unknown lies out of sight. Time is not universal. It is cultural, linguistic, PERSPEIVAL. Physics dismantles it even more brutally. Einstein showed that time is relative, tied to motion and gravity. Move faster and time slows. Approach a black hole and time stretches near infinity. There is no single now shared across the universe. What is simultaneous for you is not for another light years away. Time is not a river. It is a landscape, and you experience only a thin path through it. Some theories go further, suggesting that past, present, and future all coexist in a block universe where time does not flow. It simply is. You do not move through time. You are a fixed structure within it, every moment equally real. The flowing feeling of time, then, would be another illusion of perception, like color or solidity. If this is true, the death you fear has already happened, and so has every joy you will ever live. Eternity is not endless time, it is all times at once. Your experience of time is stitched from unreliable memories, distorted attention, predictive hallucinations, and cultural metaphors. The universe itself offers no privileged present. What you call now is a trick of survival. You do not live in time. You live in a story of time. So ask, if memory reshapes the past, if perception lags behind the present, if physics denies a universal now, then what is time beyond your mind's fragile theater? You walk through the world believing your body belongs to you, that your skin defines your boundaries, that your decisions spring from some central self. But biology and psychology dismantle this illusion piece by piece. What you call your body is less a sovereign whole and more a chaotic federation of competing forces, most of which do not even carry your DNA. Start with the bacteria. For every human cell in your body, there are at least as many microbial cells, trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi living in your gut, on your skin, in your lungs. Collectively, this ecosystem is called the microbiome. They digest your food, regulate your immune system, even influence your mood. Studies show that transplanting gut bacteria from depressed mice into healthy ones induces depressive behaviors. Your thoughts and feelings may not originate in your brain at all, but in colonies of microbes you never asked for. Who is really speaking when you think? Then there is the nervous system. You imagine decisions as commands issued by a central authority, your conscious will. But Benjamin Libet's experiments revealed something darker. By measuring brain activity, he found that unconscious neural activity predicted participants' choices up to several hundred milliseconds before they were consciously aware of deciding. Later research pushed this predictive window back even further, sometimes seconds before awareness. Conscious will, then, may be nothing more than a commentary after the fact, a narration layered atop decisions already made. Are you steering, Or are you a passenger telling yourself a story of control? Even your sense of bodily ownership is fragile. The rubber hand illusion shows this with cruel simplicity. Place a fake hand in front of a person while stroking both the fake and real hand synchronously, and soon the person feels the fake hand is their own. When the fake hand is threatened, they flinch. The brain's map of the body is negotiable, malleable, easily tricked. The boundaries of self are not drawn in flesh, but in perception. And perception is manipulable. All. History, too, carries examples of people possessed by their own bodies. In cases of alien hand syndrome, one's hand acts independently, buttoning a shirt only for the other hand to unbutton it. Neurological damage reveals the horrifying truth. The body is not one, but many systems poorly integrated, always on the verge of disunity. You are less an individual and more a coalition, pretending at harmony. Your gut sends signals to your brain through the vagus nerve, sometimes overruling cortical decisions. Hormones surge without your permission, shifting mood, energy, desire. Sleep deprivation alters your personality more effectively than any ideology. Chemicals, bacteria, neurons, hormones each pull strings. Where in this network is the sovereign you? Even your genetic code is not singular. Chimerism, the condition of harboring more than one set of DNA, is more common than you think. A woman tested for maternity once discovered she was not the genetic mother of her own children. Her eggs carried DNA from a vanished twin absorbed in the womb. Inside you may live multiple genetic identities, coexisting without your knowledge. And still deeper, mitochondria, the powerhouses of your cells, are not entirely you at all. They descend from ancient bacteria engulfed by early eukaryotes billions of years ago. Your energy, your ability to live at all, depends on a symbiosis with organisms that were never human. Your body is not one lineage, but many, stitched together by accident and necessity. So much of what you think of as choice is dictated by biochemistry. Cravings, aversions, habits, all can be traced to patterns written by evolution and reinforced by environment. Addiction demonstrates this brutally. Even when the conscious self resists, the body pulls toward repetition. Autonomy collapses under the weight of compulsion. You tell yourself you are free, but your body does not ask, it demands. Step back, and the question becomes unbearable. If your body is a microbial ecosystem, if your mind is a late narrator of unconscious decisions, if your very DNA is stitched together from accidents and invaders, then what part of you can truly claim ownership? If your body is not yours, then whose is it? You assume consciousness is the light inside your skull, the place where everything comes together, where thoughts, sensations, and awareness converge into the indivisible unity of you. But this unity is a fabrication. Neuroscience, philosophy, and psychology all reveal the same unsettling truth. Consciousness is not a single thing. It is a scattered collection of processes, stitched into a narrative only after the fact. Like a badly edited film pretending to be seamless. Split-brain studies show this most clearly. When the corpus callosum, the bundle of fibers connecting the brain's hemispheres, is severed to treat epilepsy, two independent streams of consciousness emerge. The left hand may perform tasks that the right hemisphere understands, while the speaking left hemisphere remains unaware. In such cases, researchers have asked questions separately to each hemisphere, and each gave different answers. Two minds in one skull, and yet the person still insists they are a single self. You are a confabulation layered over multiplicity. The illusion deepens when we examine attention. At any given moment, your senses bombard you with far more information than you can process. Consciousness acts as a spotlight, illuminating only a sliver. The rest falls into darkness. But here lies the trick. You do not feel the absence. You believe you see the whole room, when in truth you perceive only fragments. This is change blindness, when large alterations to a visual scene go unnoticed because they fall outside attention. Your consciousness is blind, and it doesn't even know it is blind. Then comes the interpreter. In Michael Gazzaniga's work, the left hemisphere continuously constructs explanations for behavior, even when it does not know the cause. Ask someone with a split brain why their left hand performed an action, and the speaking hemisphere will invent a plausible reason. This is not deception, it is necessity. Consciousness cannot admit ignorance, so it weaves fictions. You are living inside the voice of a storyteller who lies to you without realizing it. Consider also the global workspace, theory. Consciousness may be nothing more than information broadcast across brain systems, a temporary spotlight where certain processes gain dominance. If true, consciousness is not fundamental but emergent, an echo chamber of neural competition. Or take integrated information theory, which measures consciousness in degrees, implying it is not all or nothing, but gradational, present even in simple systems. If consciousness admits no clear boundary, then your vaunted self-awareness may be only a difference of degree, not of kind. Philosophy presses further. Thomas Metzinger argues that the self does not exist, that what you experience as selfhood is a model generated by the brain, transparent to itself. You look through it, never at it, mistaking representation for reality. In this view, there is no one who experiences. There is only experience. The self is a useful hallucination. Even in everyday life, consciousness betrays its fragility. In hypnosis, people act against their supposed will, yet insist they are merely compelled by suggestion. Under anesthesia, time collapses entirely. You enter nothingness, then return as though no interval passed. In flow states, consciousness narrows so fully into action that self-awareness disappears. Consciousness is not stable. It flickers, expands, contracts, vanishes. If it can dissolve so easily, how real can it be? Some theories suggest consciousness may not even be necessary for most of what you do. Walking, speaking, typing, driving, all can operate unconsciously. By the time you are aware of acting, the machinery has already moved. Consciousness is less the conductor of the orchestra than the late reporter describing the music after it has played. So what is consciousness? A spotlight? A confabulation? An emergent broadcast? A graded property of matter itself? Every answer collapses into uncertainty. Yet you cling to the feeling of being an indivisible I. But that feeling, too, is manufactured. You are not the mask removed. You are the mask itself. If consciousness is only a mask, then what wears it? You believe words are tools, neutral vessels carrying thought from one mind to another. But words do not merely carry thought. They shape it, distort it, trap it. Language is not a window, but a cage. Every syllable you speak carves the boundaries of what you can imagine, binding you to categories you did not choose. Consider the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which suggests that the structure of language influences perception itself. Cultures with no word for blue do not perceive it as distinct from green. The Himba people of Namibia categorize colors differently, and their language allows them to discriminate shades that you would never notice. Your very ability to see the world depends on the words you inherited. You think language describes reality, but in truth, it creates the version of reality you are able to perceive. Look at how time shifts under language. English speakers imagine the future ahead and the past behind. But in Aymara, spoken in the Andes, the past lies in front of the speaker visible, knowable while the future lurks behind, unseen. A single grammatical choice flips the axis of time itself. If language alters even the direction of time, what else has it bent beneath your notice? Language also shapes memory. Experiments show that people's recollections of events can be altered by the verbs used in questioning. Was the car smashed into the other? Or did it merely bump? The difference changes not just description, but perception people shown. The same event remember broken glass that was never there, simply because of a word. Words do not follow thought. They colonize it. Even your sense of self is linguistic. Try to imagine yourself without the silent stream of inner speech. Without words, how would you narrate your existence? Infants and animals live in a prelinguistic world. Their experience is unshaped by syntax. Yourself, by contrast, may be little more than a story written in grammar. Consciousness as autobiography, thought as endless narration. Who would you be without the voice in your head? History proves that language is not just description, but control. Totalitarian regimes manipulate language deliberately, shrinking vocabularies, redefining words, erasing meanings. George Orwell's fictional newspeak was modeled on real tactics. If rebellion cannot be described, it cannot be thought. Modern politics still thrives on this. Words like freedom, terror, or security are twisted until they command emotional obedience. Control language, and you control thought. Philosophy has long wrestled with this trap. Ludwig Wittgenstein concluded that the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. You cannot conceive beyond the grammar you speak. Even your attempt to imagine outside of language comes filtered back through words, a recursive loop. Every effort to escape falls back into the cage. Science, too, is not immune. The very categories we use, particle, wave, matter, energy, are metaphors forced by linguistic necessity. Quantum mechanics collapses under these metaphors, describing entities that are neither particles nor waves, but something beyond words. And yet physicists must speak, so they distort. Your understanding of reality bends not around reality itself, but around the limitations of language. And beneath all this lies the question, is language itself an accident? Evolution did not sculpt it for truth, but for survival. Words evolved not to describe reality, but to coordinate tribes, to manipulate, to persuade. Your deepest beliefs, your most sacred truths, may all be byproducts of survival strategies written in grammar. You thought language gave you freedom of thought. But what if it gives you only the illusion of freedom? What if every thought you have ever had was chosen for you long before you spoke it? If your language built the cage of your mind, then can you even imagine what lies beyond its bars? You have been taught that history is the solid bedrock of human memory, the collective record of what has happened. You think it is stable, objective, factual, but history is not truth. It is a story told by survivors, edited by victors, rewritten by those who control ink and paper. What you call the past is a palimpsest of lies layered over lies, and even the lies forget themselves. Consider George Orwell's warning in 1984. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. This is not fiction, it is description. The Soviet Union routinely rewrote its history books, erasing purged officials from photographs, changing records to match the new ideology. Today you look at those doctored images with horror, yet forget that every textbook you read was also curated, simplified, censored. Which parts of history were omitted before you ever learned them? Which silences shaped you more than the words that were left? Memory itself warps collective history. Psychologist Frederick Bartlett demonstrated that people retelling unfamiliar stories unconsciously reshape them to fit their cultural expectations. Over generations, details vanish, events distort, meaning shifts. Oral traditions transform not by accident, but by necessity. Stories must be bent to fit the needs of the present. Collective memory is not a mirror of the past, but a rewriting of it. And yet the illusion of continuity remains. National identities are built on mythologies, presented as fact. The founding fathers of nations become saints, their crimes erased. Wars are reframed as noble struggles, atrocities minimized or justified. Historical figures become symbols, stripped of complexity. What you inherit is not the past, but propaganda disguised as heritage. You are living inside myths that pretend to be history. Even archaeology, the supposed science of the past, cannot escape subjectivity. Artifacts are interpreted through the lens of current theory, and those theories shift with culture. What one century calls ritual objects, another calls tools, another calls art. The bones cannot speak for themselves. They are given voices by the living. You think we dig up the truth, but what we dig up are mirrors of our own assumptions. The fragility deepens when we remember how much has simply been lost. The Library of Alexandria, burned. Countless manuscripts destroyed by conquest, fire, neglect. The vast majority of human experience, songs, rituals, entire languages, has vanished without record. Your view of history is not merely distorted, it is microscopic. You live in the shadows of what was erased. Even recent history is unstable. Eyewitness testimony falters, documents are forged, digital media can be altered. Deep fakes now blur the line between record and invention. The more technology advances, the more indistinguishable falsification becomes. When everything can be fabricated flawlessly, how will you know whatever truly happened? And then comes the paradox of your own memory. Each time you recall your personal past, you edit it. Each time you tell your story, you reshape it. If personal memory is unreliable, why should collective memory be any stronger? History is the memory of civilization, and it is no less prone to distortion. So ask yourself, if the past is constantly rewritten, if facts dissolve into narratives, if memory is fabrication, then did history ever exist at all? Or is it only the illusion of continuity in a world where nothing endures? You wake each day believing in a stable identity, a continuous I stretching across the years. You say, I was a child, I am an adult, I will grow old, as if the same person threads through every stage. But the self you defend so fiercely is not a permanent structure. It is an ever-shifting construct, fragile and inconsistent, built out of habits, roles, and memories that are themselves unstable. Not begin with psychology. Erik Erikson described identity as a series of crises: childhood, adolescence, adulthood, each demanding a new resolution. Who you are at one stage is not who you are at the next. The self is a negotiation, never finished, never permanent. Yet you speak as though it were a single unbroken core. Which part of you is the true one? The frightened child, the arrogant adolescent, the weary adult? Or are they all fictions stitched together? Look at dissociative identity disorder. Within a single body, multiple selves can emerge, each with distinct memories, voices, even physiological responses. Brain scans show different activation patterns depending on which self is present. If one human can contain many selves, then what stops you from questioning whether your unity is also an illusion, one mask, speaking at a time while others sleep beneath it? Even in the absence of pathology, you fragment constantly. You are one person with your family, another with your friends, another at work. Each role demands a different vocabulary, posture, even morality. Social psychology names this self-concept differentiation. But the truth is simpler. You are not one person. You are a swarm of masks, each emerging when needed, each claiming to be the authentic you. And then there are the experiments on self-perception. In the mirror test, animals that recognize themselves are said to possess self-awareness. But does recognition prove identity, or merely recognition of a body? When you look into the mirror, what do you actually see? The reflection changes with time. The face that greets you today is not the one from a decade ago, nor the one from tomorrow. If identity clings to flesh, then who are you when the flesh transforms? Philosophers dismantle identity further. David Hume claimed the self is a bundle of perceptions with no underlying substance. When he looked inward, he found only fleeting sensations, never a solid I. Derek Parfit carried this further, arguing that personal identity is not what matters. Psychological continuity is enough. In his view, if your memories and traits were transferred to another body, survival would be no less real than if you stayed in your own. If identity can be copied, then what exactly is preserved? Neuroscience adds another fracture. The default mode network activates when you are not focused outward, weaving the narrative of self. Damage it, and the story dissolves. Meditation practitioners report similar experiences. The sense of I can vanish, leaving awareness without owner. If the self can disappear and return, how real was it to begin with? Even your legal and moral systems depend on a self that may not exist. The law punishes individuals, assuming continuity between the actor and the punished. But if the person who committed the crime no longer exists, if their mind and character have changed entirely, who exactly is being punished? When you say someone has become a different person, do you mean it metaphorically or literally? The illusion of identity is perhaps the most intimate of all illusions. Without it, you would collapse into chaos. Yet with it, you live a lie. You clutch at a center that is not there. So ask, if the self you defend is just a story, a shifting mask, a bundle of perceptions, then who exactly is living your life? You believe you see the world as it is, colors, shapes, sounds, objects arranged in a shared external space. But perception is not reception. It is construction. Your brain receives fragments of sensory input, guesses at their meaning, and stitches them into a seamless hallucination, so convincing that you mistake it for reality itself. Begin with vision. Photons strike your retina, triggering electrochemical signals. But there are no colors in light-only wavelengths. Red, blue, green are not properties of the world, but interpretations of your nervous system. Colorblind individuals, or those with tetrachromacy, literally inhabit different visual realities. The apple on your table is not red. It only appears red because your brain has decided it should. If perception depends on biology, then whose version of reality is the true one? Illusions expose this construction with brutal clarity. The Muller-Lyer illusion: two lines of equal length, one tipped with inward arrows, the other outward, makes one appear longer. Your brain refuses correction, even when you know the truth. Or consider the checker shadow illusion. Two squares, one in shadow, one in light, appear different shades, though they are identical. Your perception cheats you, insisting on coherence over accuracy. Reality is sacrificed for a useful hallucination. Sound functions no differently. What you call tone is vibration interpreted by your ear, filtered by your brain. The McGurk effect demonstrates how fragile it is. When sound and lip movement conflict, you hear something entirely new. Perception fuses inputs into a compromise rather than admit contradiction. You hear what you expect to hear. Touch, two lies. The phantom limb phenomenon reveals that sensation does not require flesh. Amputees feel their missing hands itch, burn, grasp. The body map in the brain is so insistent that it hallucinates touch where none exists. If your own body is a hallucination, what does that make the world beyond it? Even the stability of vision is a lie. Your eyes constantly dart in saccades, yet you perceive continuity. Between blinks, the world vanishes for milliseconds, yet you never notice. The brain stitches these absences into seamless experience. Your continuous perception is in truth a stop-motion film, edited to fluidity by a director you will never meet. Psychology pushes further. Inattentional blindness proves that you can fail to see what is directly in front of you. In the famous invisible gorilla experiment, participants counting basketball passes often fail to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. You believe you see everything, but you see only what you attend to. The rest is deleted before it even reaches awareness. And yet you trust this hallucination enough to build science, law, morality. You build entire civilizations on the assumption that you share a reality. But what you share overlapping hallucinations, fragile alignments in a sea of private fabrications. Every window you look through is a mirror. Even neuroscience has begun to describe perception as controlled hallucination. Predictive processing models suggest the brain generates hypotheses about the world, constantly testing them against input. What you see is not raw data. It is prediction confirmed or revised. The world you inhabit is the world your brain expects. So when you look around now, when you touch your chair, when you hear my words, how much of this is reality, and how much is the hallucination your brain refuses to let you question? If perception is a hallucination, then what happens when the hallucination fails? Time flows, or so it seems. You experience a past that lingers in memory, a present that slips away in an instant, and a future that forever recedes beyond reach. Yet time, though felt with absolute certainty, remains one of the most elusive constructs in human thought. What is this thing you move through, and why does it move at all? Consider the present moment. You believe you inhabit it, but try to grasp it, and it dissolves. Neuroscience suggests the now you experience is not instantaneous, but smeared across intervals of processing. Your conscious present may be 500 milliseconds long, a stitched-together average of incoming stimuli. You never live in the razor edge of time, only in a rolling echo. The past feels solid, but it too is slippery. Memory is no archive, no perfect recording stored in neural vaults. It is reconstruction, rebuilt each time you recall it, altered by context, emotion, expectation. The past exists only as mutable stories told by neurons, as unreliable as perception itself. When you think you remember, you are in truth imagining anchored only by traces. And the future? Pure abstraction. It is inference and anticipation, a set of guesses masquerading as destiny. You plan for it, fear it, race toward it, but it has no existence beyond your imagination. In a sense, you never encounter the future. You only ever inhabit a constantly rewritten now. Physics makes the paradox more severe. Einstein revealed that time is not absolute, but relative, intertwined with space. Two observers moving at different speeds inhabit different temporal realities. A clock racing near the speed of light ticks slower than one at rest. For the traveler, less time passes than for the one left behind. Whose now is real? Both and neither. At the quantum level, the problem deepens. Equations of fundamental physics often treat time as unnecessary, or at least not fundamental. Particles do not evolve. In time, time itself seems to emerge only from certain perspectives. Some theories suggest the universe may be timeless at its core, with time arising as a byproduct of entanglement, order, or consciousness itself. And yet, you cannot escape time's grip. Your body ages, cells decay, entropy rises. The arrow of time, its one-way direction, seems undeniable. But why does time flow forward and not backward? The laws of physics work in both directions. If you reverse them, the equations still hold. Only entropy, the growth of disorder, provides direction. Time flows forward because disorder tends to increase. But does that mean time is merely entropy's shadow? Now recall your own inner life. Waiting in agony makes time crawl. Joy makes it fly. In danger, time seems to slow, every second stretching into an eternity. If time is objective, why does it bend to your mood? Perhaps because time, like perception, is partly hallucination and internal metric for change, not a cosmic current. So you find yourself trapped in a paradox. Time is everywhere, shaping all you do, yet you cannot touch it, see it, or pin it down. It slips through physics, slips through memory, slips through consciousness. If the present is smeared, the past reconstructed, and the future imagined, do you ever truly experience time at all? Or is time the greatest illusion of them all? You believe in a you. You call it your identity, yourself, your soul, your continuity. You speak of your memories, your choices, your intentions, as though they belong to a single entity, coherent and stable across time. But what if the self you cling to is nothing but a convenient hallucination, a necessary fiction stitched together by a brain desperate for order? Neuroscience has been brutal to the idea of a unified self. Consider split-brain patients, individuals whose corpus callosum, the bundle of fibers linking the two hemispheres of the brain, has been severed. Experiments reveal that each hemisphere can act with its own will. The left hemisphere may speak, while the right hemisphere moves a hand in contradiction to what is spoken. When asked to explain the action of the right hand, the left hemisphere invents a reason, confabulating without awareness of its ignorance. Which half is the real self? Both? Neither? Then there is the case of dissociative identity disorder, once called multiple personality disorder. Some patients exhibit entirely distinct personalities, different memories, accents, handwriting, even different allergic responses. In one state, the body reacts violently to a substance. In another, it tolerates it. The body itself is pulled into the fragmentation of identity. What does that say about the solidity of you? Philosophy anticipated this collapse centuries earlier. David Hume, in the 18th century, declared that the self is not an entity, but a bundle of perceptions, linked by habit and memory. He wrote that when he looked inward, he never caught a glimpse of the self only of thoughts, sensations, emotions flickering and vanishing. The self was not an anchor, but a pattern mistaken for one. Modern cognitive science echoes this. The self appears to be a narrative center, a virtual model constructed by the brain to predict, coordinate, and remember. It is not that you have a self, but that your brain generates one for practical purposes. The IA is an interface, not a substance, but this interface is unstable. Memories shift, personalities alter, preferences transform. Are you the same person you were 5 years ago? 10? Your cells have been replaced, your neurons rewired, your experiences rewritten. Continuity feels real, but the ship of Theseus' paradox lurks beneath. If every part of you has changed, in what sense are you still you? The illusion deepens when you consider the default mode network, the brain system for self-referential thought. This network activates when you daydream, recall your past, imagine your future, or reflect on your identity. Meditation practices that silence this network often produce the sensation of ego, dissolution, and annihilation of the boundary between self and world. Practitioners report that the self vanishes, replaced by pure awareness. If the self can vanish so easily, how real is it? Even language conspires in this illusion. Grammar requires a subject. Sentences require I. Without the linguistic scaffold, the self collapses. Cultures with less emphasis on individual pronouns describe identity differently, sometimes as collective, fluid, or temporary. Could it be that the self is, in part, a trick of grammar? And yet, you cling. You cling because without the illusion of self, responsibility dissolves, morality evaporates. The very notion of survival becomes incoherent. If there is no you, who suffers? Who hopes? Who fears? But here's the final twist. You are not even the author of your actions. Libet's experiments in the 1980s revealed that brain activity predicting a movement occurs hundreds of milliseconds before the conscious decision to act. Your brain decides before you do. The self arrives late, claiming ownership of choices it never made. Free will, identity, authorship all reduced to after-the-fact stories. So what remains of you? A bundle of perceptions, a fabricated narrative, a grammatical necessity, a puppet whose strings are pulled by unconscious processes. And yet you feel so certain. If the self is nothing more than a hallucination, then who exactly is reading these words right now? You comfort yourself with history. You believe the past is recorded secure, that events once written become stable truths. You imagine archives, documents, monuments, anchors that hold against the erosion of time. But history is no anchor. It is a battlefield of memory, always revised, always rewritten, always weaponized. Take the phenomenon of collective memory. The past is not preserved, it is constructed. Nations select certain events to remember and others to erase. Victories are glorified, defeats forgotten, atrocities minimized. Consider how textbooks differ between countries describing the same war. One side calls it liberation, the other invasion. Which is true? Both, and neither. Truth splinters into perspective. Even individual memory bends under pressure. Psychologists like Elizabeth Loftus have demonstrated the ease of implanting false memories. Subjects, convinced they were lost in a shopping mall as children, later recall vivid details of the fictional event. Memory is malleable, porous, vulnerable to suggestion. If you can remember what never happened, what separates history from invention? Now scale this fragility upward. Think of propaganda. Totalitarian regimes excel at rewriting the past. In Orwell's 1984, the Ministry of Truth systematically alters records to align with the party's current stance. But this is not fiction. It mirrors reality. The Soviet Union erased purged leaders from photographs, airbrushed from existence. China censors its own recent past, shaping collective memory with surgical precision. History is not discovered, it is manufactured. Even the most sacred records falter. Ancient texts survive only in copies of copies, filtered through translators, scribes, editors. How much of what you call antiquity is authentic, and how much is interpolation, error, or deliberate alteration? The words of philosophers, prophets, emperors, are they theirs, or the shadows of countless transcribers who bent meaning across centuries? Archaeology too deceives. Ruins tell only fragments. An artifact here, a shard there. Entire civilizations reconstructed from partial evidence, always interpreted through present assumptions. A single new find can overturn decades of certainty. The past is never fixed, it is an ever-shifting hypothesis. And what of digital history? You assume the internet preserves everything, but digital records are even more fragile. Websites vanish, links rot, platforms collapse. Files become unreadable as formats die. What will remain of your age in 100 years? Billions of posts lost in obsolete code, leaving behind only scattered ruins for future archaeologists of data. At the deepest level, even objective history, the history written in the rocks, the stars, the physics of the cosmos, is unstable. Cosmology rewrites the story of the universe with each new observation. The age of Earth shifted by billions of years across centuries of measurement. The universe was once thought eternal, then born in a Big Bang, now perhaps in a multiverse. If cosmic history itself changes, how secure can human history ever be? Your own personal history is no different. You tell stories about yourself, narratives of who you were, how you came here, why you matter. Yet these are fictions too, endlessly revised. You downplay some events, exaggerate others, censor details that do not fit. You curate your own archive until you forget what is true and what is decoration. So history personal, collective, cosmic is not a chain of facts, but a field of shifting interpretations, manipulations, and erasures. There is no single past, only contested versions of it. If history is never stable, if the past itself bends and breaks each time it is recalled, then what remains of the comforting illusion that anything was ever truly real? You touch the world and believe it is solid. You trust the ground beneath your feet, the table under your hands, the body you inhabit. But solidity is the most deceptive illusion of all. The deeper you look into matter, the more it unravels, until what remains is nothing but patterns of probability, waves of possibility, and emptiness so vast it mocks the very concept of substance. Begin with atoms, the supposed building blocks of everything. They feel firm to you, yet each atom is 99.999999% empty space. The nucleus is a speck compared to the void that surrounds it, electrons buzzing like faint ghosts in vast emptiness. If your body were stripped of all that empty space, compressed down to its true stuff, it could fit in the palm of your hand. And yet that palm itself is just as hollow. Electrons, the supposed particles of matter, refuse to behave as particles. They spread like waves, collapse like points, flicker between possibilities, depending on whether they are observed. The famous double-slit experiment revealed this paradox brutally. When unmeasured, electrons form interference patterns, behaving like waves of probability. When measured, they collapse into particles, as if awareness itself decides reality. The world does not exist in definite form until confronted. What, then, is solidity? The feeling of resistance when you press your hand against a wall is not atoms colliding, but electric repulsion. The electrons in your hand repel those in the wall. You never actually touch the wall. You are pushed away by invisible forces. Your most intimate sense of contact is nothing but interaction at a distance. And the nucleus, that supposed core of matter, offers no refuge. Protons and neutrons themselves are not solid, but swarms of quarks and gluons, entities that cannot be isolated, flickering within uncertain fields. Dig deeper, and even these dissolve into mathematical abstractions, vibrations of fields, excitations of an invisible quantum vacuum. Matter ceases to exist as substance, replaced by relations, probabilities, equations. Even the vacuum itself is unstable. Quantum field theory reveals that what appears as empty space seethes with virtual particles, flashing into and out of existence, a boiling foam of energy beneath perception. Nothingness is not nothing. It is an endless creation, an annihilation. At the cosmic scale, the absurdity intensifies. Most of the universe is not even made of atoms at all. Dark matter, invisible and undetectable except through its gravitational pull, outweighs normal matter 5 to 1. Dark energy, a force tearing the universe apart, accounts for nearly 70% of reality. The substance of existence, the matter you see, touch, and trust, amounts to less than 5% of the whole. The rest is shadow, unknowable, a cosmic absence. Philosophers have struggled with this dissolution for centuries. Democritus imagined indivisible atoms as the bedrock of being, but quantum mechanics shattered that dream. There is no ultimate brick of reality, no smallest building block, only layers of uncertainty, probabilities stacked on probabilities, until nothing firm remains. And yet you still believe in your solidity. You still cling to your body as though it were real, to your possessions as though they were solid, to your world as though it were grounded. But the deeper you gaze, the more you see that everything you know as matter is nothing but vibration, emptiness, and chance. So ask yourself, if the world you touch is mostly nothing, if the substance of your body is a probability cloud hovering over void, then what exactly is the real you think you inhabit? You live as if consciousness is obvious. You wake, perceive, think, feel. You assume that awareness simply is, needing no explanation. Yet consciousness is the most confounding riddle in all of science and philosophy. It cannot be weighed, measured, or reduced to mere electrical signals. You believe you are aware, But what is awareness? A glow within the skull? A byproduct of neurons? An illusion so convincing it convinces itself? The hard problem of consciousness, a phrase coined by philosopher David Chalmers, remains unanswered. The easy problems of consciousness, how the brain integrates information, processes language, coordinates behavior, these can be mapped, simulated, replicated. But the hard problem is the question of qualia. Why does brain activity feel like anything from the inside? Why should electrical impulses produce the taste of salt, the color red, the sting of grief? Why should matter ever produce subjectivity at all? Materialist accounts insist that consciousness must arise from neurons, from the brain's wet machinery. Yet no equation explains the leap from firing synapses to felt experience. The binding problem remains. Billions of neurons firing separately somehow produce a unified stream of awareness. Where is the you that experiences the symphony of signals? Consider the thought experiment of philosophical zombies. Imagine creatures identical to humans in every respect: behavior, speech, reactions, yet with no inner experience. They scream when hurt, smile when pleased, but inside there is nothing. Could such beings exist? If yes, what distinguishes them from you? If no, what guarantees that your consciousness is more than an elaborate performance? Neuroscience deepens the unease. Brain scans can reveal when you will make a decision before you become aware of choosing. Stimuli presented too quickly for conscious perception still influence your actions. You act without awareness, and only afterward does consciousness swoop in to claim authorship. Are you truly the pilot, or just the narrator of a flight already underway? Then there is anesthesia. One moment you are here, experiencing. The next moment nothing. Not darkness, not void, but non-existence itself. Hours pass in absolute absence, and then you return. Where were you? Where did you go? If your consciousness can vanish so utterly, what anchors it? What prevents this moment from vanishing too, never to return? Philosophy offers no refuge. René Descartes declared, "I think, therefore I am," grounding existence in awareness. But what if the I is itself constructed, a fiction emerging from processes that run without any need for a self at all? Hume denied the persistence of a conscious subject, finding only flickering impressions. Buddhism has long taught that the self is illusion, that consciousness is a flow without substance. Some turn to panpsychism, the radical suggestion that consciousness pervades all matter, that even electrons possess a primitive interiority. If this is true, your awareness is not unique, but a complex arrangement of simpler experiences. Yet this explanation dissolves into vagueness. If everything is conscious, then what distinguishes your suffering from the stone silence? Others propose that consciousness is an emergent simulation, an evolved trick, a virtual interface the brain creates to monitor itself. In this view, your awareness is no more fundamental than the desktop on a computer screen, a convenient fiction hiding incomprehensible processes beneath dot, and then there is the simulation hypothesis itself. If the universe is a simulation, consciousness may not arise from physics at all. It may be coded, instantiated, rendered within a system whose rules you cannot perceive. Your awareness could be an artifact of design, or worse, a byproduct, unintentional, like static emerging from circuitry. Yet none of these explanations answer the simplest, most devastating question. Why are you aware now? Of all the infinite configurations of matter, of all the billions of brains and bodies across history, why is this stream of experience yours? You cannot trade it, escape it, or prove it. You are trapped inside a first-person view that no theory can fully explain. And here is the recursive abyss. Consciousness studies itself. You are awareness trying to understand awareness, a mirror staring into its own reflection. Every attempt collapses inward. Every explanation falls short. Every theory leaves you suspended in the same brutal uncertainty. So tell me, if no one can explain why matter should awaken, how can you be sure that your own awareness isn't the cruelest illusion of all the illusion that there is something here, when in truth, there is nothing? You believe words are tools, that language is a bridge from your mind to the world, from your inner life to another's. But words are not bridges. They are cages. Every sentence you form, every thought you name, every idea you carry is confined by the architecture of language. You do not wield words. They wield you. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis suggests that language shapes perception itself. Cultures with multiple words for snow perceive snow differently than cultures with only one. Some languages lack a word for blue and instead describe it as a shade of green. Does that mean speakers of such languages literally see color differently? Perhaps. Studies reveal subtle but measurable differences in perception based on linguistic categories. Language does not merely describe reality. It structures it. But what does that mean for you? That the world you believe you see may not exist outside of the terms your language provides. Your vocabulary carves up reality into units, erases continuities, emphasizes some phenomena while silencing others. Without words, you cannot think certain thoughts. Your mind is not free. It is bound by syntax, grammar, lexicon. Even your concept of self is linguistic. You say I, and suddenly there is an agent, a center, a continuity. But I is just a pronoun, a placeholder. Without this linguistic crutch, your sense of self might dissolve. Whole cultures with different pronoun systems conceptualize identity differently, emphasizing collectivism over individuality. If the self depends on language, then what are you before words? Philosophy circles this prison endlessly. Ludwig Wittgenstein declared that the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. If you cannot name it, you cannot conceive it. Silence is not just the absence of speech. It is the absence of possibility. You are trapped in a conceptual cage, so total that you mistake it for freedom. And the cage is recursive. When you think in language. Inner speech structures your cognition, guides your choices, organizes memory. Try to think without words, and you slip into haze. Images, sensations, vague impressions arise, but they lack the precision and coherence of linguistic thought. Does this mean you cannot truly think without language? Or worse, that language itself is the only thought? Consider deception. Words can twist, manipulate, obscure. Propaganda, lies, and distortions infect language, and through language, perception. If reality is mediated by words, then whoever controls words controls reality. You have seen this. Regimes that rename atrocities as victories, corporations that rename exploitation as freedom, institutions that hide behind euphemisms. The prison is not neutral. It can be engineered. Even truth falters under linguistic scrutiny. Words are symbols, arbitrary and shifting. Tree points to a thing, but only through convention. Change the convention, and meaning collapses. Translation exposes this fragility. Some words have no equivalent in other tongues, unique emotional shades that vanish when forced into alien syntax. If truth relies on words, then truth itself fractures across languages. And then comes recursion. These very sentences, right now, are trapping you in patterns of thought. I use words to dismantle words, a prison to describe a prison. You cannot escape without language, but with language, you remain confined. So you must face this. Every thought you've ever had, every memory, every plan, every philosophy has been filtered through a narrow channel you did not choose. Language is not your tool. It is your warden. If the limits of language are the limits of your world, then what horrors exist just beyond words forever unseen, because you cannot even begin to name them? You trust your memories. They anchor you, give you continuity, convince you that you have lived a life, made choices, learned lessons. You say, "I remember," as though that phrase guarantees truth. But memory is not truth. It is a liar, a deceiver, a story you tell yourself over and over until you forget it was a story. Psychology has shown this with brutal clarity. Elizabeth Loftus' experiments on false memories revealed how easily recollection can be fabricated. Subjects were told they had once been lost in a shopping mall as children, a completely invented event. Later, many vividly remembered it. Details, emotions, imagery, all conjured out of nothing. Their brains had rewritten the past to fit suggestion, but the lie does not require external manipulation. Each time you recall a memory, you destabilize it. Neuroscience shows that recollection reactivates neural circuits, making the memory malleable. In the act of remembering, you rewrite, alter, reshape. The memory is stored again, but changed. Recollection is not retrieval, it is reconstruction. Every time you remember, you drift further from what was. This is why eyewitness testimony, long trusted in courts, is so unreliable. People misremember faces, times, sequences. Stress distorts detail. Suggestion contaminates recall. Entire convictions have been built on memories later proven false. Memory feels solid, but it is one of the weakest foundations for truth. Even the structure of memory is deceptive. You imagine it as a library or archive, stored away for later access. But it is more like a web of associations, fragile and shifting. A smell triggers an image. A song evokes a moment. Yet those triggers can also produce illusions, memories that never were, fused with fantasies, dreams, or cultural fragments. Consider déjà vu, the eerie sense you have lived this moment before. Some theories suggest it is a misfiring of memory circuits, the present falsely flagged as a past event. You feel certain, but the certainty itself is an error. How many other certainties are errors unnoticed? Then there is trauma. Traumatic memories may sear into the mind, unyielding, vivid. Yet even these are not untouched. They can be suppressed, altered, or fragmented. Some resurface decades later, reshaped by therapy, suggestion, or cultural scripts. Memory is not a record. It is a battleground dot at the deepest level. You must ask, what are you if not your memories? Your sense of identity, your continuity, your choices all tied to recollection. Strip them away, and you fragment. This is why Alzheimer's terrifies. The erosion of memory is the erosion of self. When memory dies, who remains? Philosophers have long sensed this fragility. Nietzsche warned of the burden of memory, the way it chains you to a constructed past. Hume denied any permanent self, seeing only a bundle of perceptions and recollections. If all identity is memory, and memory is fallible, then your entire self is built on lies, and yet you trust. You trust the images in your mind, the voices of your past, the sensations you replay. You trust them even as they betray you, even as they warp and collapse. Without them, you would be lost. With them, you are deceived. So ask yourself, if memory is a liar and the self is nothing but memory, then what remains of you when even your own past cannot be trusted? You move through life believing you choose. You imagine yourself standing at crossroads, weighing options, deciding paths. You speak of freedom, responsibility, accountability. You punish and reward others as though they could have acted differently. But what if every choice you make was decided before you ever became aware of it? What if free will is nothing but the afterimage of decisions already written? The experiments of Benjamin Libet in the 1980s were the first cracks in this illusion. Subjects were asked to move their fingers whenever they felt the urge, noting the moment they became aware of deciding. Electroencephalograms revealed something disturbing. The brain's readiness potential, the signal of impending action spiked hundreds of milliseconds. Before the subject reported choosing, the brain had already acted. Consciousness arrived late, claiming ownership of a decision it did not make. Later studies extended this further. Using brain scans, scientists could predict with significant accuracy which button a subject would press up to, 7 seconds before the subject became aware of deciding. 7 seconds of unconscious activity, hidden from awareness, unfolding before the self even enters the scene. Where in this chain is freedom? Philosophy has long warned of this. Spinoza declared that humans are conscious of their desires, but ignorant of the causes that determine them. Schopenhauer put it bluntly, man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. Every action, every decision, every choice arises from causes beyond your control, your genetics, your upbringing, your environment, your neural wiring. You did not choose your parents, your culture, your brain chemistry. How then could you have chosen your choices? And yet, you feel free. You feel the weight of choice, the anxiety of possibility. But this feeling may itself be an evolved illusion, a trick of consciousness to unify your behavior. The sense of agency keeps you cohesive, motivates responsibility, allows society to function. The illusion of free may be adaptive, but illusion nonetheless. Consider addiction. The addict chooses and chooses again to quit, but cannot. The compulsion overrides the will, exposing its fragility. Or think of habits, rituals, compulsions you perform without awareness. The decision was never conscious. You acted, and only afterward explained why. Then there is the determinism of physics. If the universe is governed by laws, every particle's motion follows from what came before. From the first moment of the Big Bang, everything that will happen, including your reading this sentence, was set in motion. Freedom becomes impossible. You are not a chooser. You are the unfolding of inevitability. Some turn to quantum mechanics for escape, hoping indeterminacy restores freedom. But randomness is no salvation. If your choices are not determined but random, then they are not yours either. Chance is not agency. Whether by necessity or randomness, your will dissolves. And yet punishment persists. Responsibility persists. Morality persists. Societies are built on the belief that you could have acted otherwise. But if no one could ever act otherwise, then punishment and reward are cruel absurdities. Punishing puppets for strings they could not control. So here's the abyss. Your sense of choice is a story told after the fact. Your decisions were made before you were aware of them, caused by forces you never controlled, unfolding from conditions you did not choose. If every choice was already written before you could think it, then tell me, when exactly did you ever decide to be you? You experience time as a river. It flows forward, carrying you from birth to death, moment to moment. The past lies behind, fixed and unchanging. The present flickers now, vanishing as soon as it appears. The future lies ahead, unreal, waiting to be born. This sense of flow feels undeniable. But what if time does not flow? What if everything that ever was, is, and will be exists simultaneously, and your sense of moving through it is only a trick of perception? This is the block universe of physics. According to relativity, time is not separate from space, but fused with it, forming spacetime. Past, present, and future are equally real within this four-dimensional block. There is no special now, no universal present. What you call the present is just the slice of spacetime your consciousness happens to inhabit. A being elsewhere, moving differently, may see a different now. All moments exist, eternally fixed. The flow you feel is not in time itself, but in you. Einstein saw this clearly. In a letter of condolence, he wrote that for those who believe in physics, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. If the block universe is real, your birth and your death coexist as points already written. You are not traveling from one to the other. You are all of them already. But if this is true, then becoming is impossible. Growth, change, movement, these dissolve into illusions of perspective. The child you once were is not gone, only elsewhere in space-time. The old self you will become is not waiting, but already there. What you call life is simply the traversal of a fixed map, not the creation of a journey dot, and yet you feel the future open, uncertain. You make plans, chase goals, regret the past, hope for what might come. But the block universe denies possibility. Everything is already there. The decisions you think you are making have already been made, your path already carved into space-time. The sense of openness is ignorance. You cannot see the future, and so you mistake your blindness for freedom. Worse still, if all moments coexist, then death is no release. You do not vanish, you are eternally preserved in the block. Every joy, every pain, every humiliation and regret, these are not past. They are permanent, frozen into the structure of reality. You will always be born, always live, always die. You cannot escape them. Eternity is not bliss, but repetition. Philosophers wrestled with this long before physics. Augustine asked, "What is time?" If the past no longer exists, and the future does not yet exist, then only the present is real. But the present, too, slips away instantly, leaving nothing. If time is real, it vanishes. If time is unreal, it traps everything. The psychological illusion of flow comes from memory and anticipation. Memory strings events into a narrative, creating the sense of a past. Anticipation projects possibilities, creating the sense of a future. Consciousness stitches these together, generating the story of a moving self. But if memory is unreliable and anticipation is delusion, then the story collapses. There is no flow, only a scattered sequence of stills, a film reel mistaken for a river dot. And if there is no true present, no universal now, then your sense of being here, now, is false. You are not at the center of time's stream. You are a point in an unmoving block, pretending to drift out. So consider this. If time does not flow, then you are not becoming. You are already everything you ever will be. Every triumph and every failure, every laughter and every scream, already etched into space-time, immutable. You are not living through them. You are them forever dot. And if this is true, then answer this. If all of time already exists, what does it mean to say you are alive now? You are taught to believe in cause and effect. One thing happens, then another follows, bound together by necessity. The ball drops because you let it go. The glass shatters because the ball struck it. Your finger bleeds because the glass cut it. This chain of causation feels like the most basic structure of reality, the skeleton of logic itself. But the more closely we examine causality, the more it dissolves, until you are left with fragments of coincidence masquerading as law. David Hume was the first to tear at this illusion with devastating clarity. He asked, "When you see one billiard ball strike another, and the second ball move, what do you truly observe? You do not see causation, you see sequence. One event followed by another. The link, the necessity, the must is invisible. You assume it because you have seen such sequences repeated, and you project that pattern onto the world. But the compulsion you feel is not in the events, it is in your mind. Causation, Hume argued, is nothing but habit. Modern physics does little to comfort you. At the quantum level, events do not unfold deterministically. Radioactive atoms decay at unpredictable times. Particles exist in superpositions, only collapsing into definite states when measured. The most precise theories we have rely not on certainty, but on probability. Causation here is not necessity, but likelihood. A statistical mist where you once thought there were chains of iron. Even worse are experiments in quantum entanglement. Two particles, once linked, can influence each other across vast distances instantly, faster than light. This seems to break the very notion of causal sequence. If one event causes another across space-time without mediation, what becomes of your chain? Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. But the spookiness is not in the physics. It is in the collapse of your assumption that causality grounds the world. And yet, without causality, how do you understand anything? Every explanation depends on it. Every thought you think relies on the assumption that one idea produces the next. Remove causation, and reason itself crumbles. How can you even claim to understand Hume's critique if thought itself might be no more than arbitrary sequence, stripped of necessity? Your brain rebels against this collapse. It insists events happen for reasons. Things follow from other things. But ask yourself, can you point to the reason for your next thought before it arises? Or does it simply appear, unbidden, as though whispered from nowhere? And if the chain cannot be found even in your own consciousness, why do you believe it exists outside? Determinists try to save the chain by claiming that everything is already fixed. The future flows inevitably from the past. But this collapses freedom. Indeterminists try to save freedom by appealing to chance. But chance is no cause. It is its opposite. You are trapped between chains and chaos, neither offering the security you crave. And so causality collapses. Events follow one another, but the link is gone. Your sense of law is nothing but repeated coincidence dressed up as necessity. The world is not bound together. It is fragments, disconnected, stitched only by your desperation for meaning. If nothing truly causes anything else, then what are you? Not a coherent sequence of causes and effects, but a flicker of unrelated sparks, strung together into a story that has no foundation. And if that is true, then ask yourself this. When you say I act, I decide, I cause, what is it exactly that you think you are doing? You wake each day with the conviction that you are the author of your life. You choose when to rise, what to eat, where to go, how to act. This sense of freedom seems inseparable from being human. Without it, you are reduced to an automaton, a puppet. But every attempt to defend free will collapse under scrutiny, leaving you with the unbearable recognition that your choices were never yours. Neuroscience delivers the first blow. In the 1980s, Benjamin Leibotz's experiments revealed that the brain shows activity preparing for a movement, what he called the readiness potential, hundreds of milliseconds before the subject reports consciously deciding to act. Later studies extended this window to several seconds. Your brain decides before you become aware of deciding. The conscious self you cling to is not a cause, but a commentator, arriving late to the scene, inventing the story that it willed what had already begun. Some attempt to salvage freedom by claiming that you can still veto the unconscious choice, exercising a final moment of control. But this veto, too, arises in the brain before you are aware of it. You are not the origin. You are the echo. Philosophy fares no better. If determinism is true, if every event follows from prior causes, then your decisions are simply the unfolding of physical laws, inevitable since the beginning of the universe. You could not have chosen otherwise. If indeterminism is true, if randomness rules at the fundamental level, then your decisions are chance events, like dice rolled in the dark. In neither case do you find genuine freedom. Compatibilists argue that freedom means acting in accordance with your desires, without external coercion. But where do those desires come from? Did you choose them? Did you choose the genes that shaped your temperament, the environment that conditioned your tastes, the traumas that carved your fears? Or did they choose you? To say you are free because you act on desires you never authored is to confuse the chains for liberty. Your sense of control is a story your brain tells to maintain coherence. Daniel Wegner called it the illusion of conscious will. You see your hand reach for the glass, and you tell yourself, I chose that. But the decision has already happened, outside your awareness. The narrative of choice is retrofitted to the action. If free will collapses, morality collapses with it. How do you blame or praise someone for actions that were inevitable? How do you hold yourself accountable for choices you could not have avoided? Every courtroom, every prison, every religion, every system of justice presumes freedom. Without it, punishment becomes cruelty and responsibility becomes nonsense. And yet, you continue to feel free. You feel it when you hesitate, when you weigh options, when you struggle to decide. But hesitation does not prove freedom. It only proves conflict between competing unconscious processes, hidden battles in the brain whose outcome you only witness. The horror of determinism is not chains, but inevitability. The horror of indeterminism is not chaos, but irrelevance. And the horror of compatibilism is not freedom, but delusion. Every path ends with the same void. You are not free. So the question returns to you, stripped of comfort. If your choices are neither authored by you nor free from necessity, then what are you, a self who acts, or merely a shadow cast by causes you will never control? You cling to the idea of a self stable, enduring, the one who thinks, chooses, remembers. Without it, you fear collapse into nothing. Yet the more you look for the self, the more it splinters, until you realize it was never there. The self is not a substance, but a story, fragile and false. Buddhist philosophy anticipated this centuries ago. The doctrine of anatta no self declares that what you call I is a bundle of processes, sensations, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness. These five aggregates swirl and interact, but none is a self. They arise and vanish like waves on water. You confuse the continuity of process with the permanence of identity. But when you search, you find no core-only flux. Western philosophy arrives at the same void. David Hume confessed that when he looked inward, he never found a self, only a bundle of perceptions succeeding one another. Thought, feeling, sensation, these appear, shift, vanish. The self is not discovered, but imagined, stitched together by memory and habit. Modern neuroscience drives the knife deeper. Split-brain experiments revealed that when the corpus callosum connecting the hemispheres is severed, two centers of consciousness emerge. Each hemisphere can act independently, with its own perceptions and intentions. When asked to explain actions initiated by the disconnected hemisphere, the dominant hemisphere fabricates stories, unaware of the other's influence. If the self can divide so easily, what unity did it ever possess? Even in the intact brain, the self is fractured. Different neural networks compete for control, and the narrative self weaves coherence after the fact. You believe you are one, but you are legion. And if damage to the brain can erase memories, alter personality, or create entirely new identities, what does it mean to say you are the same person across time? Derek Parfit pushed this to its logical conclusion. Imagine your brain divided and each half transplanted into a new body. Both successors remember your life, think they are you, feel entitled to your identity. Which one is you? If identity can split, then it is not what matters. Parfit concluded that personal identity is not a deep fact, but a convenient fiction. What matters is continuity of psychological processes, not an enduring self. But continuity, as we've seen, is itself unstable. Your sense of self is a mirror, and every crack reveals another illusion. Memory is unreliable. Consciousness flickers. Personality shifts. Neuroscience fractures unity. Philosophy denies permanence. Buddhism denies existence. What remains is not a self, but a story, endlessly rewritten, narrated by no one God? And if there is no self, then who is asking this question? You assume that consciousness is the core of everything, that awareness is the light within which reality appears. Without it, the universe would be dark, meaningless, silent. But what if consciousness itself is not a substance, not even a thing, but only an illusion generated by processes that do not need it? Philosophers call it the hard problem. David Chalmers framed it simply. Why should physical processes give rise to subjective experience at all? The brain could, in principle, process information, guide behavior, and produce speech without ever generating inner experience. Your neurons fire, your muscles respond, your body moves. Why is there something it is like to be you, rather than nothing at all? No scientific theory answers this. All explanations reduce consciousness to patterns of information or brain activity, but none bridge the gap from mechanism to experience. Some, like Daniel Dennett, claim that consciousness is not a thing to be explained at all, that it is an illusion, a trick of the brain. What you call consciousness is the brain monitoring itself, narrating its own processes in a way that feels unified, but is not. There is no central theater where awareness happens, only distributed computations, stitched together after the fact. The spotlight of attention is not light, but the absence of light, the illusion of focus in a machine that does not need a witness. Consider blindsight. Patients with damage to their visual cortex claim to see nothing in part of their visual field, yet when asked to guess what is there, they identify objects with startling accuracy. The information is processed unconsciously, guiding behavior without awareness. The seeing self insists it is blind, but the body acts as though it sees. This reveals a terrible possibility. Awareness is not required for function. Consciousness is an ornament, not an engine. Now recall the experiments in which decisions arise in the brain before you are aware of making them. Combine this with blindsight, and a grim picture emerges. Your body can see without seeing, act without deciding, function without awareness. Consciousness arrives only to take credit, narrating what was already inevitable. But if awareness is an illusion, who is being fooled? If there is no central self, no unified experiencer, then consciousness is not even a lie. It is an empty word, pointing nowhere. Some philosophers propose panpsychism, that consciousness is fundamental, present in all matter. But this multiplies the horror. If every particle has a sliver of experience, then your mind is not unique, but a swarm of micro-experiences bound together. You are not one consciousness, you are countless fragments, held in uneasy unison. Others suggest the simulation hypothesis, that consciousness is not generated but simulated, a byproduct of processing inside a vast machine. But what is more terrifying, that your awareness is a program, or that it could be deleted with a single command, leaving the body to carry on without you, untroubled by the absence? Every path collapses. If consciousness is fundamental, you are not special. If it is emergent, you cannot explain why. If it is an illusion, then you do not exist at all. The spotlight you thought illuminated the world may be nothing more than a flicker in the dark, an afterimage in a hollow theater where no one is watching. So tell me, if consciousness is an illusion, then who exactly is reading these words? You believe language sets you free, that by naming the world you master it, that by shaping words you shape thought. But language is not freedom. It is a cage, and the bars are invisible because they are made of words themselves. Ludwig Wittgenstein declared that the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. You cannot think beyond the words you have. Where a language lacks a concept, you cannot form the thought clearly. It slips from grasp. Cultures with no word for blue do not perceive blue as you do. Speakers of languages that lack tense see time differently, not as flowing sequence, but as static blocks. Your sense of reality is filtered, distorted, confined by the vocabulary handed to you. Consider Orwell's Newspeak in 1984. Totalitarian state sought to eliminate dissent not by force, but by erasing the words that could express it. Without words for freedom, for rebellion, for individuality, thought itself narrows. You cannot rebel against what you cannot articulate. The horror of Newspeak is not fiction. It reflects a truth already present in you. Psychologists call it the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, linguistic relativity. Language does not simply label reality. It shapes it. The Hopi people describe time without past, present, or future-only events manifesting and unmanifesting. To them, time flows differently. Russian speakers, with distinct words for light blue and dark blue, perceive shades more acutely than English speakers. Words carve perception, sculpt cognition. You do not see reality, you see your language's version of it. Worse still, language deceives you into believing that words correspond to stable truths. But words are arbitrary symbols, drifting over time, unstable and slippery. Justice, self, truth, freedom. You use them as though they pointed to solid ground, but they are floating signifiers, shifting with culture, context, power. When you argue, when you reason, when you think, you are not grappling with reality, but with the shifting shadows of words. Nietzsche saw language as a prison of metaphors, hardened into concepts, passed down until you forget their origin. What you call truth is nothing but a mobile army of metaphors, metonyms, anthropomorphisms. Words conceal reality more than they reveal it. They trick you into mistaking the label for the thing, the map for the territory dot, and yet you cannot escape. To question language, you must use language. To doubt it, you must rely on it. You are trapped within the cage, scratching at the bars with the very tools that keep you locked in. Every thought you have, every belief you hold, every memory you recount, passes through language. And language is not yours, it is given to you, shaped by culture, by history, by forces beyond your control. You speak with a borrowed tongue, and it speaks you more than you speak it. If the self is a story, then language is its author. And if language is a prison, then who is the prisoner, you, or the silence beyond words that can never be spoken? You assume truth is the ground beneath your feet, and no matter how unstable life feels, there must be something solid, a reality that can be known. But what if truth itself fractures under scrutiny, leaving only shifting perspectives, contradictions, and illusions? What if truth is not a discovery, but a weapon wielded to control? Philosophers have wrestled with this collapse for centuries. The correspondence theory of truth claims that statements are true if they match reality. But this presumes you have direct access to reality itself. You do not. You have only perception, filtered through senses that can be fooled, distorted, severed. A mirage looks like water. A hallucination feels as real as touch. Your brain does not show you the world, it shows you a model. And if all you ever know are models, how do you know whether they correspond to reality at all? Coherence theories try to escape this by saying truth lies in consistency. A belief is true if it fits with other beliefs. But entire systems of belief can be internally coherent and entirely false. The geocentric universe once formed a perfect system. Alchemy was coherent, astrology elegant, phlogiston theory compelling. Consistency proves nothing but itself. Pragmatists claim truth is what works, what produces results. But lies often work. Delusions can comfort. Propaganda can mobilize nations. Does their effectiveness make them true? If so, then truth dissolves into utility and morality into power. Nietzsche saw this collapse clearly. There are no facts, only interpretations. What you call truth is simply the perspective that prevails, the story reinforced by repetition, the belief sanctioned by power. Michel Foucault extended this truth is inseparable from regimes of power that define what counts as knowledge. Every textbook, every courtroom, every laboratory operates under conditions set not by objective reality, but by social forces, political decisions, historical accidents. The truths you inherit are the victories of past struggles, not eternal facts. Science appears to stand above this chaos, but even science reveals instability. Newton's mechanics, once absolute, were overturned by relativity and quantum theory. Each framework seemed final until it was not. Every truth in science is provisional, waiting to be displaced. The closer we peer at reality, the less stable it becomes. Waves become particles. Particles become probabilities. Probabilities dissolve into uncertainty dot, and so truth fractures. What remains is not solid ground, but shifting sands. Every claim is vulnerable, every belief provisional. Yet you cannot live without truth. You need it to orient, to act, to speak. You must believe in something even as everything collapses dot, so ask yourself, if every version of truth is partial, provisional or imposed, then what is truth but the name you give to the lie you can no longer see? You trust history to anchor you, to tell you what happened, who you are, where you came from. It feels like the collective memory of humanity, preserved in records, carved in stone, safeguarded against forgetting. But history is not memory. History is narrative, written and rewritten by those with power, shaped by bias, omission, and invention. What you call history is not the past itself, but a script performed so many times you mistake it for truth. Every history book is an argument disguised as fact. The choice of what to include and what to omit already warps the story. Wars are remembered for victories, not for the anonymous dead. Nations celebrate their founding myths and bury their atrocities. Columbus is remembered as a discoverer, not as an instigator of genocide. Textbooks reduce centuries into clean arcs of progress, smoothing away the brutality, the chaos, the chance. What is lost in this simplification is not detail, but reality itself. Consider how fragile the record truly is. The Library of Alexandria, once holding vast knowledge of the ancient world, was destroyed. Countless works of philosophy, science, and history vanished forever. The Mayan codices were burned by conquistadors. Centuries of culture and memory incinerated in hours. What survives is not what was most true, but what escaped destruction. Your picture of the past is a shadow cast by accident. Even what survives is unreliable. Ancient chronicles routinely mixed fact with myth, exaggerating victories, omitting defeats. Medieval scribes altered texts as they copied them, whether by mistake, interpretation, or ideology. Modern propaganda operates in the same way. Newspapers, films, speeches, all sculpt collective memory in real time. Stalin had rivals erased, not just from photographs, but from official Soviet history. What once was becomes what never was, and the record complies. Archaeology, too, is not immune. Artifacts are discovered, interpreted, displayed, but interpretation depends on contemporary frameworks. A shard of pottery may be evidence of trade or ritual or accident. Entire civilizations are reconstructed from fragments, but reconstructions change as theories shift. Each generation rewrites prehistory according to its own assumptions. Beneath these distortions lies an even deeper uncertainty. The past itself is irretrievable. You can never step back into it, never confirm it directly. You know it only through traces, texts, ruins, bones, memories, and every trace requires interpretation. The past does not speak. You put words into its mouth. The philosopher Hayden White argued that all history is narrative. Events do not come pre-packaged with beginnings, middles, and ends. Historians impose these structures, weaving causes and consequences, casting heroes and villains. History reads like story because it is story. It is not the past, but the literature of the past. And so the anchor of history dissolves. You are not standing on solid ground, but floating in stories, stitched together by fragile documents, biased voices, erased names. The past is not what happened. It is what was remembered, written, and permitted to survive. But if history is rewritten endlessly, then who are you? Your identity, your culture, your sense of belonging, these depend on the stories you have been told about the past. If those stories are unstable, shifting, contingent, then yourself is too. You are not built on bedrock, but on quicksand. So ask yourself this: if history is only the story told by survivors, then what makes you so sure that even your own memories are not just propaganda whispered to you by your mind? Time feels like the most undeniable fact of existence. The ticking of a clock, the changing of seasons, the slow aging of your body time appears linear, irreversible, and constant. You imagine it as a river, carrying you from birth to death with no turning back. But when you try to grasp it more closely, time dissolves into paradox. The philosopher Augustine admitted, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it, I know not. You live inside time, yet you cannot define it. It governs everything, but it remains elusive. Physics complicates matters further." Einstein revealed that time is not absolute but relative. For a speeding astronaut, time dilates, running slower compared to Earth. For someone near a black hole, time itself bends under gravity. Seconds stretch or contract, depending on where you are and how fast you move. There is no single universal clock. The river of time does not flow the same for all observers. It warps, twists, and folds. And then there is the mystery of now. You speak of the present as if it were real, a razor-thin line separating past and future. But how wide is now? A second? A millisecond? Neuroscience suggests your perception of the present lags behind reality, stitched together by your brain from sensory fragments. By the time you say, "this moment," it has already passed. The present is always slipping away, always gone. If the present is slippery, what of the past and future? The past feels fixed, unchangeable, but your memory is unreliable, rewritten each time you recall it, colored by emotion, influenced by suggestion. What you remember is not the past itself, but a reconstruction. The future feels open, undecided, but quantum mechanics hints that multiple possibilities may exist until observed. Does the future already exist, waiting to unfold? Or is it created as you move forward? Some philosophers argue for the block universe. Past, present, and future coexist, laid out in a four-dimensional structure. You only experience the illusion of moving through it. If this is true, your life is not a journey, but a static pattern already complete. Every decision, every moment, already written. Free will collapses into perception. Yet time also resists being pinned down as something. Is it a dimension? A measure of change? Or only a concept invented by human minds to organize experience? If all clocks stopped, would time cease? Or would it continue without measure? And still, you cannot escape it. Every heartbeat is time's reminder. Every wrinkle is its scar. Whether illusion or dimension, time binds you, marking your existence with beginnings and endings. But here lies the final paradox. Time may not flow at all. What if flow is only an illusion of consciousness, a trick of memory stringing moments together? Perhaps the past is not gone, and the future is not yet to come. Perhaps everything simply is, eternally. If so, you have never left your birth, nor will you ever reach your death. You are all of your moments at once, though you can only glimpse them one by one. So ask yourself this: is time carrying you forward, or are you trapped, endlessly paging through a book already written? You call yourself I, as if the word points to something stable, something solid. You believe there is a continuous thread binding your childhood self to the person reading this now, and binding this moment to the person you imagine will die someday. But the more closely you examine the self, the more it dissolves into fragments. Psychologists have shown that your personality is not fixed, but fluid, shaped and reshaped by circumstance, culture, and chance. The you of 10 years ago would find the you of today unfamiliar. Preferences shift. Beliefs collapse. Memories warp. Yet you insist there is a core, an essence holding it all together. That belief is comforting, but it is false. Consider the ship of Theseus. If a ship has every plank replaced, is it the same ship? If your body's cells are continuously replaced, most of them within a span of years, are you the same person? Or are you a copy, wearing the memories of someone else? Split brain experiments, where the corpus callosum is severed, reveal that the self can fracture into two competing centers of awareness, each unaware of the other's knowledge. Which one is truly you? The left hand might reach for something the right hand rejects. Two minds in one skull. The unity of self is an illusion of communication, and when communication falters, the illusion collapses. Neuroscience shows the brain does not generate one coherent self, but a patchwork of specialized modules. One part makes decisions. Another narrates them afterward. Another constructs memory. Another interprets emotion. The illusion of a single I emerges from the coordination of these fragments, but it is no more real than the center of a storm. A hurricane appears unified, but it is only wind spiraling around emptiness. Buddhist philosophy reached this conclusion centuries ago. The self is not a substance, but a process, a bundle of perceptions, sensations, and thoughts. What you call I is only a convenient label for a stream of experiences, none of which endure. Yet the illusion persists, reinforced by language and memory, because to admit its emptiness is to face annihilation while still alive. And if the self is an illusion, then who suffers? Who makes choices? Who dies? Your pain, your guilt, your fear, do they belong to anyone? Or are they just passing phenomena? Waves crashing in a sea that has no owner? You cling to the story of self, because without it, everything falls apart. But if you are just a temporary narrative stitched together by neurons, what remains when the narrative ceases? When the voice in your head says, I am, who exactly is speaking? You trust your senses because you have no alternative. Sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell seem to anchor you to reality, convincing you that the world outside is real and continuous. But each sense is not a window. It is a filter, a distortion, a limitation. What you call perception is not reality itself, but the brain's hallucination of reality. Consider sight. You believe you see everything clearly, yet your eyes capture only a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum, less than 1%. Infrared, ultraviolet, radio waves, gamma rays, they all pass through you unseen, shaping the universe in ways you will never directly perceive. To claim sight gives you truth is to mistake a pinhole for a panorama. Even within that sliver, your brain fabricates much of what you think you see. The blind spot in your vision, where the optic nerve meets the retina, should leave a hole in your sight. Instead, your brain fills it in with a guess, a seamless illusion. What you see right now is partly invention, and you cannot tell which parts. Sound deceives you as well. Your ears can only detect vibrations between roughly 20 and 20,000 hertz. Above or below those frequencies, entire worlds of sound exist. Whales conversing across oceans, bats mapping landscapes with sonar, machines humming just beyond your awareness. To you, they are silent, yet they saturate the air around you. Touch, too, is a trick. You never actually feel objects directly. The atoms in your skin repel the atoms of whatever you touch. And what you call contact is the electromagnetic resistance between fields. You feel pressure, not solidity. Your entire experience of the physical world is of forces, not surfaces. Smell and taste rely on receptors tuned to chemical molecules. But again, the range is narrow, incomplete. Dogs can perceive layers of scent you cannot imagine time itself traced in odors. To them, the air is history. To you, it is nothing. Neuroscience reveals that perception is less reception than prediction. The brain is a prediction machine, constantly generating models of the world and updating them with sensory input. You do not see reality. You see your brain's best guess, corrected occasionally by evidence. This is why optical illusions, like the molar lines or the rotating mask, can so easily deceive you. Your brain chooses interpretation over accuracy, story over truth. The philosopher Kant argued that you never know the thing in itself, only the phenomena shaped by your senses and cognition. Reality in itself is inaccessible, forever outside your grasp. You are trapped in a theater, watching projections that you mistake for the stage. And yet, you cling to the illusion, because without it you could not act. You navigate the world through hallucination, trusting a map you know is false. You build your life on a scaffolding of guesses. But if your senses are filters, not windows, then what is outside them? If you can never experience reality as it is, then in what sense can you claim to know it at all? What if the world you believe you inhabit has never been real? What if you have only ever lived inside a simulation constructed by your own brain? You were taught that history is a chain, a clean sequence of causes and effects, stretching from the past into the present. Wars begin and end. Empires rise and fall. Leaders act, and their choices ripple outward. But history is not a chain, it is a broken mirror, its pieces scattered, rearranged, reassembled, according to power and forgetting. What you believe happened is never the whole, and much of it never happened at all. Consider memory at the personal level. As Elizabeth Loftus proved, false memories can be implanted with shocking ease. People can be made to remember being lost in a mall, meeting Bugs Bunny at Disneyland, even witnessing crimes that never occurred. If individuals cannot hold a reliable past, why assume societies can? Collective memory is even more vulnerable, malleable, selective, rewritten by those who control the narratives. Entire cultures have lived in the shadow of deliberate erasure. The Library of Alexandria burned and countless works vanished forever. Mayan codices were destroyed by Spanish conquistadors, entire histories reduced to ash. The records of lost civilizations, the Indus Valley, Cahokia, Göbekli Tepe, remain fragmentary, leaving only speculation. And the gaps are filled not with truth, but with stories we want to believe. Power thrives on this. Totalitarian regimes rewrite history openly. Stalin erased rivals from photographs. The Chinese government censors Tiananmen Square from textbooks. But more subtle erasures occur everywhere. Nations glorify victories, bury atrocities, invent continuity where there is rupture. What you call your country's history is not truth. It is propaganda polished by repetition. Even science, which claims objectivity, is subject to the erosion of record. Paradigms dominate, suppressing alternatives until evidence overwhelms them. How many truths vanished not because they were false, but because they were inconvenient? There is also the problem of interpretation. Archaeology does not give you the past. It gives you bones, stones, and ruins. From them, you construct a story. But another story could always be told. A temple becomes a palace. A tool becomes a weapon. A ritual becomes a myth. You believe you know, but you are only guessing. And behind the fragments lies the silence, the overwhelming majority of human lives unrecorded, unremembered, erased by time. For every emperor whose deeds are carved in stone, millions lived and died without trace. Their stories are gone, their existence reduced to dust. What is history then? But the curated memory of power, surrounded by an ocean of forgetting. If your own memory is unreliable, and collective memory is curated, then what does it mean to say you know the past? Perhaps history is not something that happened, but something happening now, an endless act of invention, rewriting, erasing. So ask yourself, if both your personal past and humanity's past are constructed fictions, what foundation remains beneath the present? You believe yourself conscious, awake, aware. It feels undeniable, this constant hum of experience, this interior presence that no measurement seems to capture. But consciousness, the very thing you take for granted as your most intimate certainty, remains the greatest unsolved problem of science and philosophy. It is the puzzle that refuses to collapse into an explanation. Neuroscience can map the firing of neurons, the flow of electrical signals, the cascade of neurotransmitters. It can show which brain regions activate when you see red, when you feel pain, when you recall a face. But none of these correlations explain why there is something it is like to see red, to feel pain, to remember. The subjective glow of experience, the qualia, is invisible from the outside. This is the hard problem of consciousness, as David Chalmers named it. Why should matter arranged in a certain way produce inner experience at all? Why isn't the brain simply dark, mechanical, unconscious? Why is there an I inside the processes? Philosophers have tried to resolve it for centuries. Descartes insisted mind and body were separate substances, but dualism leaves unexplained how the immaterial could touch the material. Materialists argue consciousness emerges from complexity, but this explains nothing. It simply asserts that enough neurons firing somehow produce awareness. Panpsychists claim that consciousness exists in all matter, from electrons upward, but this only distributes the mystery without solving it. Experiments with anesthesia show how fragile this presence is. One moment you are here, the next you vanish, and hours later you return with no sense of absence. Where were you? If consciousness can blink on and off, what continuity do you truly possess? Consider also split-brain patients, where consciousness seems to fracture into two, or multiple personality disorder, where different identities with distinct memories and traits emerge within a single brain. Consciousness is not unified. It can be divided, replaced, extinguished. So what makes you continuous? Then comes the simulation hypothesis. If your mind is only patterns of information, why couldn't it be run on silicon rather than neurons? If simulated, would consciousness be real or indistinguishable from real? If you cannot tell the difference, what does the word real even mean? And even deeper, what if consciousness is not produced by the brain, but the brain is a filter for a larger field of awareness, as William James once suggested? What if your mind is not in your head, but your head is inside your mind? You feel certain of your awareness, but science cannot explain it, philosophy cannot resolve it, and logic cannot escape it. Consciousness is the void staring back at you, the unspeakable fact that refuses to dissolve. So tell me, if you do not know what consciousness is, how can you be sure you are conscious now? You wake each day believing you choose coffee or tea, work or rest, speak or remain silent. You move through life with the conviction that your decisions flow from some inner freedom, that you stand apart from causality and bend the world with will. But the more science and philosophy examine this belief, the more it collapses into machinery, compulsion, inevitability. Consider the experiments of Benjamin Libet. In the 1980s, he asked participants to move their hands at a moment of their choosing, while recording brain activity. Astonishingly, neural signals predicting movement appeared hundreds of milliseconds before the participants reported consciously deciding. The brain acted first. The conscious mind merely observed. Later studies pushed this window further up to several seconds. Your decisions are prepared long before you decide. If choice is preceded by unconscious processes, what remains of freedom? You feel as if you initiate action, but in reality, you narrate actions already in motion. Conscious will is less commander than commentator. Determinism deepens the problem. Every atom in your brain follows physical laws. Neurons fire because of chemical states, which themselves arise from prior causes, stretching back to the birth of the universe. In such a chain, where is freedom? You did not choose your genes, your upbringing, your culture, or the impulses that arise within you. The you who chooses is itself a product of forces outside control. Compatibilists argue that freedom is simply acting according to your desires, even if those desires are caused. But if you did not choose your desires, is that freedom or merely self-consistency? A puppet that pulls its own strings is still a puppet. And what of moral responsibility? Entire systems of justice, punishment, and reward rest on the assumption of free choice. If every murderer was compelled by brain states not of their making, are they guilty or merely unlucky? If every saint was shaped by circumstance, are they virtuous or merely fortunate? Without free will, blame and praise collapse into the recognition of causal inevitability. Yet even if you accept determinism, you still feel the weight of choice. You deliberate, you hesitate, you agonize. Illusion or not, decision-making is your lived experience. But so is the horizon. It looks real, yet it does not exist. Some philosophers and neuroscientists whisper a darker conclusion. Consciousness itself may be an afterthought, a story the brain tells to justify behavior. The sense of free will is just one more hallucination layered onto perception. You are not choosing, you are watching yourself choose. If this is true, then your life is not authored by you, but merely witnessed by you. You are not the player, you are the spectator, convinced of control because the game feels immersive. So answer this honestly. When you chose to read these words, was it ever really your choice, or had that choice already been made, written into you long before you arrived here? Every thought you've had, every desire, every fear none, can outlast the fact that you will die. You know this, yet you live as though death is an abstraction, a distant possibility. But death is not distant. It is the only certainty woven through your existence. It waits not ahead of you, but inside you, written into every heartbeat, every breath. Philosophers have long circled this abyss. Epicurus declared, "Death is nothing to us, for when we are, death is not, and when death is, we are not." But this is cold comfort, for it does not erase the terror of non-existence, the impossibility of imagining yourself absent. You can picture others dying, the world continuing without you, but you cannot picture nothingness as experienced by you. It cannot be pictured at all, for there is no you there to imagine. Neuroscience strips away illusions of continuity. Consciousness flickers nightly in sleep, disappears under anesthesia, fractures in trauma. If awareness can vanish so easily, what grounds do you have to believe it persists beyond death? The brain is a biological machine, and when it stops, the narrative collapses. Religions promise continuation heaven, reincarnation, cosmic unity, but each is speculation built on hope. None are verifiable, and all betray the same desperation, the refusal to accept annihilation. Even transhumanist dreams of uploading the mind falter. A copy may exist, but is a copy you, or simply an imitation wearing your memories? Would you experience survival? Or would you die while your twin lived on? Physics reminds you of entropy, the inevitable decay of order into disorder. Stars collapse, galaxies scatter, universes grow cold. If even the cosmos faces heat death, why believe your fragile consciousness escapes? And yet, You live each moment under the shadow of denial. Terror management theory and psychology shows that human culture itself morality, art, nations is built to distract from mortality. Civilization is a defense mechanism against the unbearable thought of death. You cling to meaning because you cannot face the void directly, but the void remains. Every conversation ends. Every relationship ends. Every body ends. And one day, even your memory will be erased, leaving nothing behind to prove you were ever here. If you cannot imagine the state after death, if you cannot carry even the concept of non-existence, then what is it you are truly afraid of? The end of experience, or the end of you as the dreamer of experience? And more chilling still, if you are only a fleeting construct, a narrative woven by neurons, then perhaps you have already died countless times. Every time consciousness dissolved into nothing overnight, every time you were gone under anesthesia, every time the self was lost in the shifting stream of identity. So tell me, if death is the only certainty, why do you still live as though it belongs to someone else? You have followed every thread downward. Memory unraveled into invention. Perception dissolved into hallucination. History fractured into propaganda. Time melted into illusion. Self disintegrated into fragments. Free will collapsed into inevitability. Consciousness itself remained inexplicable. And death stood waiting as the only certainty. At every step, you tried to resist. You reached for something solid. Truth, reality, continuity, choice. But each grasp met only emptiness, a structure built from illusions reinforcing one another. You discovered that what you call you is not the author of your story, but a reader, not the master of your fate, but a witness, not the center of reality, but another flicker in an endless recursion of simulations, appearances and erasures. You wanted answers. Instead, you found recursion. Every explanation led only to further collapse, each certainty replaced by a deeper uncertainty. You hoped for some final foundation, but the foundations themselves were sand, sliding away as soon as you stood upon them. What is left then when everything collapses? You cannot cling to time, it was never linear. You cannot cling to history, it is curated forgetting. You cannot cling to self, it is an illusion of process. You cannot cling to choice, it is machinery disguised as freedom. You cannot cling to perception, it is the brain's hallucination. You cannot even cling to consciousness, for it remains unexplained, untouchable, always beyond grasp. And death is not a conclusion, but the erasure of conclusions, the undoing of the illusion that there was ever a narrative at all. You feared it as an event ahead of you, but it was always here, in every moment of vanishing awareness, in every silence between thoughts, in every night where the world disappears and you are no one. So here, at the bottom of the descent, there is no comfort, no resolution, no redemption. There is only this, the recognition that reality was never yours to hold, that self was never yours to be, that consciousness was never yours to claim. You are not falling into the void, you are the void, staring into itself, briefly mistaken for something that was alive. So answer, if you can, who is left to awaken from this illusion now that you are gone?